Chelsea Clinton has a new podcast called That Can't Be True. This podcast is funded by the Clinton Foundation and currently has 25 reviews with an average of 2.3 stars on Spotify. So if you'd be so kind, head on over to Spotify today and give This Dumb Week a 5-star rating so that we can beat Chelsea Clinton. And with that out of the way, welcome to This Dumb Week, a weekly live Twitter space hosted by Alex Marinos and yours truly, Dr. RollerGator. Available in podcast form on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, and others. Alex, welcome back. Have you had a sufficiently dumb week?
Yeah. After a good few weeks run, I think this one has come back to the scheduled programming of dumb.
Well, you know, we took an impromptu hiatus last week, and I thought for a moment, silly me, you know, it's Christmas week. It's going to be a slow week. There couldn't possibly be anything that large to cause a ruckus to add to the stack of stuff that we missed from last week, right? You know, but oh boy, was I wrong.
Well, you see, that you should have known that this is not going to happen. I know, because this is when they dump everything they want to dump.
I know. I'm so very, very silly with those ideas.
It's sufficiently cynical, Gator. How could this happen to you?
every once in a while I have a bad thought like that. Like everything will be fine. Never mind. Okay. Well, we're gonna get started here, Alex. You wanted to bring a topic into the beginning of this episode here, which starts to broach on a subject that I've sort of had in the back of the stack throughout the weeks that we just haven't really gotten to, but now I guess is a perfect time to introduce it, and we can probably start to add it more frequently into the subject matter starting in 2026. And that has to do with Europe, the European Union, and its encroachment into freedom of speech, where it becomes particularly deleterious in enforcing what is true or what can be talked about and what aspects of true can be discussed online, which in some ways you could say only could affect Europe. But increasingly with globalization and the social networks having global reach, European laws can affect the United States companies in many ways, where you could lose a whole market if you don't comply with the EU rules, which are increasingly authoritarian when it comes to what can be discussed online. So, Alex, how would you like to introduce this? Would you like me to discuss the tweets in question, or would you like to introduce them yourself and just tell me what you want me to read?
Yeah, I mean, look, we can start on the high level. Which is to sort of take the people angle with Colonel Jacques Baud and that sort of thing. But then we should definitely go a little bit deeper and talk about what is being erected here, what are the foundations of it, what's likely to be happening, and kind of that's how I've structured in my head.
All right, so the story for you kind of starts within the last week or two, where you started a tweet saying that the EU has sanctioned Jacques Baud, one of the most lucid and evidence-based analysts of the war. I'm guessing you're meaning the Ukrainian Russian war. Is that the war in question?
Correct.
Okay. Apparently, this means that a Swiss citizen, as a Swiss citizen, he cannot fly over the EU territory, which means he cannot leave his country. This is just one of the many consequences the penalty, imposed with no due process or any kind of court hearing, has for this former Swiss intelligence analyst and former NATO advisor. His crime, quoting the words of Ukrainian officials verbatim. Okay, so you gave a little bit of his background in this tweet, saying that this person is a former military analyst, and he's a Swiss citizen.
He's a former Swiss intelligence analyst. What I didn't know when I wrote this is that he resides in Belgium, which means he is extremely fucked. He's not just fucked. He's very, very fucked. But he cannot take money out of the bank to buy bread or pay his rent or
waffles.
Or, I mean, yes, exactly. Fries, anything. Yeah, it's bad. So basically, he would have to leave his house, his home, where he lives, and go back to Switzerland,
Unfortunately, he was also barred from traveling. I presume he could take a car, right? But no plane or train.
Okay, so as a high-level sort of view, this former intelligence analyst, now unintelligence analyst, has
NATO
made,
advisor, by the way, just for extra irony, he was a former NATO advisor too.
has made comments about the Russian-Ukrainian war and among other things across time. But in particular, he has made comments about the Russia-Ukrainian war that in the EU they have designated is disinformation of some kind. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they have then sanctioned him. So the sanctions that you mentioned here is that he's not permitted to fly over the territories, right? So he's not allowed to get on a plane.
He's also not allowed to transact with any EU company.
Okay.
And that includes having a bank account in an EU bank, or actually, it's technically speaking, it's far worse than that. Even if somebody gives you something for free, they're legally liable for circumventing sanctions. So while he has not been held legally responsible for anything, sanctions are an extra legal measure. Violating the sanctions does open you up to legal repercussions.
All right, so guide us through then sort of at least the narrow sequence of events that led up to this sanctioning. He was making either a large series of comments or made one specific set of comments at a particular time that gave rise to this demand and then subsequent sanctioning of him.
So Baud is very prolific. I think he's written, I heard somewhere like 15 books, but definitely like more than 5 since he retired, covering all sorts of things from Ukraine to Palestine to, all sorts of, he also had worked in Africa. So I assume he had written something about the African conflicts, et cetera, et cetera. So he's also been appearing in podcasts. Now, importantly, being Swiss, he speaks all 3 languages of Switzerland, meaning German, French, and Italian. And he has been appearing on podcasts on all of these 3 languages, which means that this is, to me, I think why he was sanctioned. He appears on a lot of English-speaking stuff that I watch him on. I don't think they care. I think they know they've lost the Anglosphere, but I think he brings a lot of that sort of Mersheimer, type rationale to languages that, their information sphere are a lot more contained, let's call it.
So what was that descriptor you just used? Mersheimer type of
right.
reasoning.
So the type, like realist, I guess, foreign, affairs reasoning, where you don't sort of, the EU, the way it applies foreign policy is called idealist, right? They sort of envision how things should be, and then they kind of try to impose that in a way. The US has definitely, the neocons, quote unquote, are definitely of that persuasion as well. Mersheimer is more like, great powers need security. They will do what they need to do to attain security. If you try to encroach on their needs for security, it will not end well for you, right? And the usual way that, for example, what is happening in Ukraine is being presented by people like that is to say, imagine if China set up a base near the Mexican border on Mexican territory. Would the US be all like, well, this is the rule-based order and Mexican sovereignty is paramount and we will not do anything to encroach on that? Or would they be something like, you have 24 hours to evacuate the country. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
I seem to recall a missile crisis in Cuba once.
Yeah. What you don't know about that, actually, well, you might know it, but most people don't know, is that the way the Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved was by the U.S. Withdrawing the missiles that it had put in Turkey, which actually triggered the Soviet Union to try to put missiles in Cuba. So this is definitely a kind of, great powers need security spheres, and if you mess with that, you're going to have a bad time.
So you came across this sort of sanctioning. I don't know what specifically brought it across your attention. Maybe you were paying attention to this person before, or maybe another one of the channels that you pay attention to brought it to your attention. But then you had sort of a dunk tweet against someone in the EU
Well,
named
she's the
Ursula.
European president. She's not someone. She's the president. Okay.
Well, listen,
the
Ursula
equivalent of
von
Donald
der Leyen is not a person
correct.
who is a household name where I am, and I'm actually the only
your
person in my
appears to
household.
be not very
I'm the only person
date.
in my household, so I only talk to myself, and it's just not. It doesn't. It's not a name that comes frequently in my conversations.
I will grant she's no Donald Trump. Yes. Go ahead.
And so the U.S. imposed travel restrictions. Supposedly on 5 European individuals, including the former Commissioner Thierry Breton, who does have somewhat of a notoriety on Twitter for constantly going after Elon Musk and threatening the X platform with sanctions. Am I correct in this?
Well, they didn't just threaten X; they actually condemned them and are asking for 150 million. From them, and I assume if it's like any other court cases I've seen, it probably comes with mounting fines for every day that it's not being followed or something. But yeah, so then the U.S. in response sanctioned Thierry Breton, who was the person who had threatened Elon directly for hosting on X a space with, you guessed it, Donald Trump, which the U.S. says, and I do believe in this case specifically, it is accurate. It was election interference, to threaten an American platform for hosting a conversation with the forerunner of the elections. Yeah.
But they were attempting to protect democracy, Alex.
That is correct.
Now, the Ursula, the queen of the EU over there, had tweeted, "We strongly condemn the U.S. decision to impose travel restrictions on 5 European individuals, including former Commissioner Thierry Breton." And this is where you had dunk tweeted, I will call it. You froze the bank accounts of Jacques Baud, a Swiss citizen residing in Belgium, and banned every EU business from transacting with him, such that he can't even buy bread or pay rent. And your own rationale is that you didn't like what he was saying. You did this with no due process, no right of appeal, and no way to defend himself from your slanderous and ruinous accusations. And he's not the only one. You obviously have no comprehension of your the terms you use, what their meaning is, or what the purpose of the principles you so easily throw around. Unfortunately, EU citizens never elected you, so they can't unelect you. You'll keep turning the EU into USSR until your failed experiment comes crashing down. Until then, spare us the lectures. Your actions are deafening. Now, you got a good bit of traction on this dunk. Is that a good summary there?
Yeah, I mean, not to brag, but I did a 4x ratio on Ursula. So somehow I think it hit a sweet spot of being something that I think most people that follow me don't know about. And it probably also helped that it gave context for an EU action that may seem a bit extreme. And so I think, it got into a lot of networks basically and started catching fire. This is one of my most popular tweets ever, clearly. And while I was, upset while I wrote that, I think I put a lot of information in there. The one thing I want to clarify is the USSR comment. I have a video down the thread that I linked to. Sorry, in the response I linked to my original thread that has a lot more information about the Jacques Baud case. And in that thread, I have a video where somebody goes through the Soviet agitation laws in detail, like word by word, and compares them with the accusations against Baud, and kind of shows that they share an eerie amount of sort of correspondence in terms of what the crime is and what he's accused of. So that's why the Soviet reference there. It wasn't some sort of like, oh, you're commies. I mean, maybe, but it was. Now,
I just want to point out for clarity, we do have people overseas that listen to this podcast or this live Twitter space however they so choose to listen. But you and I are resident of the United States, and so therefore we have sort of a U.S. centric view at the moment of free speech and its lack of limits, so to speak, as opposed to the European Union. Now, you, Alex,
I am an EU citizen for what it's worth, but yes.
Exactly. So you do have a personal connection to the culture that is giving rise to this sort of opposition to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. So you may have more familiarity than yours truly with the emotional sentiments that go into people electing or not electing, as the case may be with the EU.
We had covered Romania a few weeks back, right? A few months back, maybe, where they just basically kind of decided that a certain election hadn't happened or something. I don't know exactly how to summarize that, but like they
didn't like who won. So
think that global events like this are of global interest. I don't agree with U.S. people that say sort of like, oh, I don't care what happens in Palestine, for example. I think, unfortunately, even if the only thing you care about is your household and your immediate surroundings, those surroundings are being influenced by events across the world. So we don't have the luxury. And truly, I would wish not to care, but we don't have the luxury of sort of, putting events of that magnitude out of our scope.
So there was a particular,
sorry, before we zoom out a little bit, if you can read on the tweet below the one you read of mine, I've quoted precisely in the EU's own words what they have accused Jacques Baud of, and I think it's important to read that to understand what
it begins with. This is the entirety of the accusations. Is that
correct?
Okay.
It's important to understand the for what infraction, because it's not a legal, it's not a crime. They're not accusing him of a crime. They're accusing him of actions that are potentially legal, to be clear. But for what infraction, they are effectively unpersoning him to the extent where, no bank will or business will transact with him.
Right. So this is the entirety of the accusation against Colonel Jacques Baud, as written by the EU. Quote, Jacques Baud, former colonel of the Swiss army and strategic analyst, is a regular guest on Russian television and radio programs. He acts as a mouthpiece for pro-Russian propaganda and spreads conspiracy theories, for example, by accusing Ukraine of having orchestrated its own invasion in order to join NATO. Therefore, Jacques Baud is responsible for actions or political measures attributable to the government of the Russian Federation that undermine or threaten the stability or security in a third country, Ukraine, through participation in the use of information manipulation and influence operations, implements them, or supports them. Then you say, you will note that they accuse him of speech crimes only. Now let's dig into the specifics a little, and I'm not going to continue reading because you can, of course, summarize better.
Basically the I think it comes across, right? So they're saying he spreads conspiracy theories, whatever that means. He acts as a mouthpiece, right? In what way? And that he conveys information that was my favorite part, attributable, not attributed, attributable. It could be coming from Russia. It does. Like, we don't exactly, tell you why we believe it does, but it could be, right? And that's all that's needed.
It sounds like it. It sounds similar too.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing that Putin would say.
Right. If he were to say it, and we know he would like it that you said it, he would approve of it. So anything that he approves of or might approve of, hypothetically, is therefore, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you feel about what you read, but like, to me, it's like, how could you, what?
I mean, my default position, of course, is that it's absolutely absurd and stupid, regardless of what he was saying. I have a very extreme perspective on the.
What if he was acting as a mouthpiece of Putin, right? Like, to the degree that he hasn't broken any laws, well, that's allowed in the European Union. It's okay to even be Russian. And
it's clearly and obviously not even a slippery slope if you start to enforce ideas like this, because it is really just then a power grab. It is whoever is in power is enforcing the hypocritical logistics of enforcing such a policy, and therefore it is not an actual coherent policy. It is not a reasonable or honorable policy. It is strictly just a power play, and it's transparently
he learned about this,
so.
By the way, from the media, right? He learned that he was sanctioned from the press, right? There was no prior communication, no warnings, no heads up, no nothing. Like, can yeah.
Well, at least he can still receive that state propaganda directly to his home.
That's
nice. He gets to stay in the loop, at least a little bit. Now, you had then shared with me something you want to have read here from a Henrika Stahl, and this is about the policy that they are using to carry out this sanctioning.
Yeah. By the way, so this is an article in, I think it's in Dutch, but if you click translate, it translates it pretty well.
It was automatically translated by the fancy browser, so
yeah.
Nice.
So, but the important thing to mention here is that, so effectively, once everybody started becoming aware of the fact that they have built themselves such tools, people with more understanding of the system in the EU have gone and dug and tried to figure out where this is coming from. Sanctioning usually is for countries sanctioning countries, right? In some cases, they sanction companies. In some more extreme cases, they sanction people. But those people tend to be like, Roman Abramovich, famous, Russian oligarch or whatever, like, somebody who
huge oil barons and such, right? Like,
yeah,
people who are able to be transnational, even though they may be a national of a country.
Right. Not people who are normal residents of the territory of the entity that is sanctioning. For that, there's laws, supposedly. Anyway, but this woman dug in, and I think there's a lot of stuff that will make your hair stand on end when you hear what, in their own words, sort of they're
so the translated tweet says such: EU sanctions due to unwanted information, even if it is legal and true. This is enabled by the new regulation of October 8th, 2024. On October 8th, 2024, the EU introduced a new sanctions framework for the war in Ukraine, which addresses, quote, restrictive measures in view of Russia's destabilizing activities. A key area newly targeted for sanctions under this regulation is, quote, hybrid threats. This includes, quote, threats arising from foreign manipulation of information and interference. This can also encompass, quote, behavior that is mostly not unlawful, which is a wonderful sort of double negative.
It's amazing.
Mostly not unlawful. It's sort of mostly legal, kind of, sort of. All legal except for maybe we don't like it, which could threaten or negatively influence values, processes, and political procedures. These activities are inherently manipulative and are deliberately and in coordinated manner carried out by state or non-state actors, including their proxies within and outside their own sovereign territory, which sounds like a much more expanded, lengthy explanation of the concept of malinformation that was sneaking its way into the U.S. government through the Biden administration.
We don't like it when you say that. It hurts our feelings.
Right. So could negatively influence values, processes, and political procedures. Yes. The regulation aims to enable measures against actors, quote, involved in foreign manipulation of information and interference when this is necessary to protect public order and security in the Union. It is emphasized here that sanctioning, quote, shall take place with full respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Of course. And specifically targets, quote, combating state-controlled manipulation of information and interference by Russia, including disinformation. Russia exploits such influence opportunities, including the manipulation of information, to, quote, harm, confuse, intimidate, weaken, and divide the member states and their neighboring countries. In plain terms, this means that sanctions can be imposed for the dissemination of information deemed to be Russian interference, even if that information and its dissemination are entirely legal. This can also include content that is thematically independent of Russia and the war in Ukraine. This is exemplified by the sanctions against Hayun Dogru or Nathalie Yalb, who did not engage thematically with the war in Ukraine at all, but were accused of acting under Russian influence. I had some vodka the other day, Alex, and I believe that the brand was Russian in origin. So I just want to get that out here for full disclosure that I may also be under the influence. The rationale for the legalization of countering legal information and activities is found in a concept paper to which the EU Council explicitly refers in the regulation. In the 2020 paper, quote, The Landscape of Hybrid Threats, a Conceptual Model, authored by the EU Commission and the European Competence Center, it is explained that hybrid warfare against democratic states deliberately targets the vulnerabilities of democracy by using legal actions as weapons to damage these countries. Such legal actions exert their harmful effect through combination and embedding in a specific situation. Just as reality is shaped by such operations into a, quote, gray zone between war and peace, the countermeasures against such operations must likewise operate in a gray zone to neutralize the legal activities weaponized against them, which would otherwise evade intervention due to their lawfulness. So, right, because they're legal, they get away with it, Alex. Can you believe that?
Can you believe this? Can you believe those Russians?
Can you believe that? Getting away with legal stuff.
And not even the Russians. Sometimes other people do things that the Russians would like. And that's not illegal. And we're not going to make it illegal, by the way.
As an instrument for operating in this... As an instrument for operating in this gray zone, misinformation and disinformation or manipulation of information are employed, which themselves lack precise definitions. I bet they're really upset with that lack of precision in their definitions, right? That's just shucks. We're going to have to leave it open-ended here.
About it. I mean, they're a whole diplomatic thunion. Surely they've got somebody.
The lack of precision in these terms is part of the strategy to remove legal and even true information from circulation when it is politically deemed harmful or as enemy interference. Now, that, again, boils down to the malinformation that I was discussing that came into the U.S. lingo under the Biden administration, which is the sort of the, quote, weaponization of true information. Such information explicitly includes the, quote, development of strong historical narratives if they are classified as, quote, false or only partially correct. Under this assumption, not only individual statements, but entire articles and even books, scientific or literary, without exception, fall into this gray zone. The case of Jacques Baud may serve as an example of sanctioning or disseminating entirely legal content that is at the same time factually and professionally adept, carefully source-based, and substantiated. Who is responsible for the criteria and assessment of such information or activities is clear in the EU context. The Council for Foreign Affairs, under the leadership of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, who pronounces the sanctions. The legality of countering even legal and true information or its actors in the interest of foreign and security policy is guaranteed by the regulation of the institution. From a formal legal perspective, it could therefore be difficult to successfully challenge such sanctions, as it is explicitly provided that the entirely legal activities and true information may be sanctioned if they are sufficiently justified as harmful interference by the enemy. The Digital Services Act, the DSA, which is the thing Thierry Barry who we mentioned before, was a huge proponent of and was using as the crux to threaten Elon Musk, if I'm not mistaken. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. Yep. The Digital Service Act operates analogously, on the basis of which the deletion of legal and even scientific statements, if classified as harmful according to certain criteria, is possible with reference to an authoritatively recognized institution and has also been judicially upheld. And now, Alex, that's something where you and I would have probably fallen prey to being underneath had it been in effect during COVID several times.
I mean... of course, because you note that a certain study is fraudulent, and it's not supposed to be. We don't like it if it is. So
the same mechanism, assessing information in the politically defined interest and eliminating or restricting it without prior legal hearing, with recourse only to subsequent litigation, is also installed by the new EU regulation, but with the difference that the sanction targets the actor themselves, not the information. How, quote, human rights and fundamental freedoms are upheld in this process, as the EU regulation specifically emphasizes, remains a mystery to me. So that tweet is in the thread and also shared to the space here. Now, there was a clip that you sent me that you wanted me to play after I read this that you said you would introduce.
Yeah, so when you hear that these sanctions are under the control of the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, you might think this is some sort of gray-bearded, old, extremely experienced, elder statesman or something.
An erudite scholar, as they would.
A scholar, yes, a person truly who is the philosopher king or something. Unfortunately for the EU, the person in that position right now is called Kaja Kallas. She was previously the Prime Minister of Estonia, from where she had to step down for various reasons, including a scandal with her husband transacting with Russia while she was not supposed to be doing so. While she was actually pushing the sanctions on Russia. So she had to step down from there. So, of course, where do failed politicians go? Well, they become the high representative of the EU for foreign affairs. Please, hit it.
This is going to be very short, but the high point is in there if you pay close attention.
What was interesting, that Russia was addressing China, like you and like Russia and China, we fought the Second World War. We won the Second World War. We won the Nazism. And I was like, okay, that is something new. But then you can see, first you can, if you know history, then, it raises a lot of question marks in your head. But, I can tell you nowadays people don't really read and remember history that much, which is that, you can see that they buy these narratives.
I do agree, Alex, that it is surprising what you learn every day, that Russia, the USSR, as it were, actually out-survived the Nazis in World War II. We're learning everything every day that's just surprising about the world.
Yeah, just don't check what side Estonia was on, and that will definitely be detrimental for your sanctions. But
I don't believe Estonia is a real place. Estonia is one of those countries that sounds made up that they put into a television show to just make it sound like a European country. Anyway,
but right? Absorb the vibe of this person, right? Like, never mind the fact that I don't know if she was misspeaking, but I don't know what she could be attempting to say. But she does this thing where not only is what she's saying completely illiterate, she's then accusing others of not reading.
I guess if you were to give a charitable interpretation, it was the inclusion of China, perhaps, in whatever she was paraphrasing.
But China did beat Japan.
Right, but not but they weren't really fighting they weren't fighting the Nazis and dealing with Europe, So but
that's not what the quote that she was talking about was.
I know it was a paraphrase, so we don't even have the thing that she supposedly.
Those are pretty bad.
I understand. I understand.
China, they're very bad. I have no problem with Japanese people today, but if you're a Chinese person in the 1940s, Japan, very, very bad.
Well, the important thing to remember, Alex, is that history is all well understood, and only people with bad intentions would be wrong about events that occurred in the past. The past is well documented, and everyone agrees about the events. There is no real disagreement. Only bad actors would disagree for, bad purposes.
That's right. Because the people don't read, and they're convinced by such narratives.
Which is surprisingly dangerous, because all the good actors are somehow accidentally misled by things they also should know. It's a surprising dynamic.
I suggest we sanction her for the misinformation she just put out there.
Now, I was mentioning the malinformation in the Biden administration, the term malinformation becoming something commonplace. And some of you may recall very well what was called the Disinformation Board that was being started under the Biden administration, that was sort of going to be observing and studying online disinformation in the United States and coordinating with social media companies to try to clamp down on the disinformation problem. And this Nina Jankowicz was the woman who became sort of the center of this endeavor, this disinformation board. And she was, appropriately maligned, in my view, in many of the, let's call it right of center spaces, who were at the time of COVID becoming increasingly victimized by the suppression of information on the online spaces, getting deplatformed from those spaces. Yours truly was banned for over a year on this platform himself. And we found when Elon Musk bought Twitter that the Biden administration was actually coordinating with these platforms, specifically Twitter and the Twitter files themselves, to nudge them to get people deplatformed. They would have people in on staff with the FBI or other places inside of the Biden administration, taking their persona non gratas and observing them, looking to see if they could find a policy that perhaps they could convince the platforms to remove them off of, to say that it was all above board. It was the policies of the platform that was doing it, but really it was the oversight of the U.S. government looking for a way to get people kicked off. And by the way, that was extra legal.
The cherry on top is that they were also providing feedback on the terms of service.
Advising them on advisable terms of service policies to have so that they could get people.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I have a 60 Minutes piece from earlier in 2025 with the reporter Sharon Alfonsi giving a rather filleting interview to German prosecutors, sort of glorifying their crackdown on speech and online speech. And the reason that I want to highlight this is twofold. One, it gives a highlight of the policies that individual states, not just the EU overarching government, is bringing upon, but individual states in the EU are increasingly bringing upon their own citizens, to show that this sort of trend is not unique to this EU government, which some view as sort of a usurpation of sovereignty in the states. The states themselves are electing to do this to themselves. So the phenomenon is not restricted to the EU. But second, it is with Sharon Alfonsi, the reporter for 60 Minutes, being the exemplar case, there is a strong desire in the United States among a certain political class to bring these same policies to the United States, or adopt them in many ways. And the governments of the EU and the individual EU states are increasingly a threat to U.S. sovereignty in this realm by being able to penalize or threaten to penalize companies that originated out of the United States, and the citizens of the United States that use those companies' online services, in order to have their free speech laws basically be the lowest common denominator among all the rules globally. So I'm going to play some excerpted clips that highlight the policy. And Alex, I want you to pay close attention to how they wiggle in something that maybe sounds reasonable with a whole bunch of unreasonable things to make them all equatable.
If you've ever dared to read the comments on a social media post, you might start to wonder if civilized discourse is just a myth. Aggressive threats, lies, and harassment have unfortunately become the norm online, where anonymity has emboldened some users to push the limits of civility. In the United States, most of what anyone says, sends, or streams online, even if it's hate-filled or toxic, is protected by the First Amendment as free speech. But Germany is trying to bring some civility to the World Wide Web by policing it in a way most Americans could never imagine. In an effort, it says, to protect discourse, German authorities have started prosecuting online trolls. And as we saw, it often begins with a pre-dawn wake-up call from the police.
The story will continue in a moment.
It's 6:01 on a Tuesday morning, and we were with state police as they raided this apartment in northwest Germany. Inside, 6 armed officers searched a suspect's home, then seized his laptop and cell phone. Prosecutors say those electronics may have been used to commit a crime. The crime, posting a racist cartoon online. At the exact same time, across Germany, more than 50 similar raids played out. Part of what prosecutors say is a coordinated effort to curb online hate speech in Germany.
What's the typical reaction when the police show up at somebody's door and they say, hey, we believe you wrote this on the internet?
They say, in Germany we say, das wird man wohl doch mal sagen dürfen. So we are here with crimes of talking, posting in internet, and the people are surprised that this is really illegal to post these kind of words.
They don't think it was illegal?
No, they don't think it was illegal. And they say, no, that's my free speech. And we say, no, yeah, free speech as well, but it also has its limits.
Interpreting those limits is part of the job for Dr. Matthias Fink, Svenja Meininghaus, and Frank Michael Lau, a few of the state prosecutors tasked with policing Germany's robust hate speech laws online. After its darkest chapter, Germany strengthened its speech laws. As prosecutors explain it, the German Constitution protects free speech, but not hate speech. And here's where it gets tricky. German law prohibits any speech that could incite hatred or is deemed insulting.
It's illegal to display Nazi symbolism, a swastika, or deny the Holocaust. That's clear. Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And it's a crime to insult them online as well?
Yes.
The fine could be even higher if you insult someone in the internet.
Why?
Because in internet, it stays there. If we are talking here face to face, you insult me, I insult you, okay, finish. But if you're in the internet, if I insult you or a politician,
That sticks around forever.
yeah.
The prosecutors explain German law also prohibits the spread of malicious gossip, violent threats, and fake quotes.
If somebody posts something that's not true, and then somebody else reposts it or likes it, are they committing a crime?
Yeah, in the case of reposting, it is a crime as well, because the reader can't distinguish whether you just invented this or just reposted it. That's the same for us.
There are 16 units across the country, each with a team of investigators. Frank Michael Lau, a career criminal prosecutor, leads the Lower Saxony unit.
How many cases are you working on at any time?
In our unit, we have about 3,500 cases per year.
9 investigators work out of this office in a converted courthouse. Lau says they get hundreds of tips a month from police, watchdog groups, and victims.
You must see a lot of crazy stuff.
Yes.
The worst of the internet is wrapped in red case folders, stuffed with printouts of online slurs, threats, and hate. To build their cases, investigators scour social media and use public and government data. Lau says sometimes social media companies will provide information to prosecutors, but not always. So the task force employs special software investigators to help unmask anonymous users. Lau says his unit has successfully prosecuted about 750 hate speech cases over the last 4 years. But it was a 2021 case involving a local politician named Andy Grote that captured the country's attention. Grote complained about a tweet that called him a Pimmel, a German word for the male anatomy. That triggered a police raid and accusations of excessive censorship by the government. As prosecutors explained to us, in Germany, it's okay to debate politics online, but it can be a crime to call anyone a Pimmel, even a politician.
So it sounds like you're saying it's okay to criticize a politician's policy, but not to say, I think you're a jerk and an idiot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Comments like "you're a son of a bitch," excuse me for using, but these words has nothing to do with political discussions or a contribution to a discussion.
Wir wissen, hate speech wirkt.
Renat Künast is a prominent German politician. In 2015, this meme of the Green Party member appeared on Facebook, falsely implying that she said every German should learn Turkish.
You never said that.
I never said that. And this harms my reputation because people think she's a bit crazy. How can she say that?
Künast, a 40-year politician, says she began receiving threats and hate-filled comments from anonymous users online.
You've spent your life in politics. What was different about what took place online?
The first point was it was much more personal. you are looking so ugly, you are an old woman, we know where you live, or even you should be raped by a group of men, so that you see what all these immigrants are doing.
So this was not elevated conversation. This was very personal and very hateful.
It was very personal.
Kunost asked Meta to delete all the false quotes attributed to her worldwide.
And they were astonished. What? We cannot do it. They said just by software. The software is not able to deal with all this. And we have to get a lot of new employees. And I said, yes, it's my personal right. It's my reputation.
Kunost sued Facebook and won. Last year, in a landmark case, a German court ruled Meta had to remove all the fake quotes attributed to her. Meta is appealing.
This court said in case of public servants which have public offices and jobs, it's public interest that their personal rights are protected, because otherwise no one would go for these jobs. That would harm democracy.
After all this, are you seeing less hateful comments now on your social media feeds?
Yes, there are less hateful comments. And there was one tweet which says, don't say that to her, she will take you to court.
You might sue them.
I might sue them.
Last year, the European Union implemented a new law that requires social media companies to stop the spread of harmful content online in Europe or face millions of dollars in fines. But Josephine Ballon of Hate Aid says some social media companies are still not complying with the new law.
I would love social media companies to be a safer place than they are right now. But what we see is that their content moderation is not comprehensive. Sometimes it seems to be working well in some areas, but in many areas it's just not.
The European Commission is currently investigating whether Elon Musk's social media company X has breached the EU digital content law. Musk, who has been criticized for using X to promote Germany's far-right party ahead of next week's elections, accused the EU of censorship and hating democracy. But in Lower Saxony, prosecutors argue they are protecting democracy and discourse by introducing a touch of German order to the unruly World Wide Web.
All right, Alex. May I have some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it does sound so much better in the original German. I don't know what to tell you. What did they say? They're bringing some order, some civilized. No, early on it was like some kindness or whatever she was saying, and then she was like, "Yeah, so they do a pre-dawn raid on your house with guns." Like, oh, that's very no. Sorry, they said they want to bring some civilization to the online spaces with a pre-dawn, and then she was like, "So we do a pre-dawn raid on your house," and it's like, that's very civilized. That is incredible.
The clips, in audio do not do justice to the smile that Sharon Alfonsi, the journalist, had on her face as she asked these questions to these people. There was no hint of oppositional journalism in this piece whatsoever. Like, she was enamored by this power.
You think she would be in favor of a touch of German order being brought to the U.S.?
But what I loved is the juxtaposition between things like death threats and then like rude comments or claimed misquotes. So the one Green Party member they were interviewing there is talking about this supposed misquoted attribution to her, saying that everyone needed to learn a particular language, foreign language or something like that. She says it's a misquote, right? And that she never actually proposed it, and it's incorrect that she said it.
To be precise, but anyway.
Well, she says that. She says that. Okay, she says it's a misquote. She never proposed it, right? And she's talking about people saying that you should be raped. So while that might be protected free speech in the United States bounds, we can all sort of agree that sort of desire is not good, that you shouldn't probably want someone to be raped. Okay, we sort of see that that's getting into the realm of, is this a threat or is this not a threat? We can see that that's encroaching on the question at least. But then she then juxtaposes it with things like you're too old, right? Which is not even remotely something that is, that bad of a comment, right? That's a normal human comment to make it at one another.
I mean,
followed by,
young, they might bring you in for this information. I don't know how.
Followed by not her demand that the companies take down things that are plausible threats, or at least skirting the line of threats, even if they're not necessarily serious in ability, they're at least clearly threatening in sentence structure, right? Someone should kill you, something like that. She goes, I demanded they take down all instances of the false quote I am asserting was made. Right? So you have the extreme things that people might get on board with.
CBS. By the way, they're repeating this, and the other person was called a pinner and whatever. They're broadcasting this on CBS in the USA.
Yes. Never call it. Now, I just want to point out that famously, Thomas Jefferson wrote in a newspaper, or had published in a newspaper, that Alexander Hamilton was a hermaphrodite. And so the United States has a long history of tolerating.
Aristophanes, man. Like, they keep talking about democracy. This is we learned this in school in Greece, that they had the comedies, quote unquote, which were like just absolutely the lowest yellow press type shit that you could imagine. But that's how discourse goes. You can't friggin' put a tie on it, because ultimately what you do when you do that is it's kind of like the same as warfare, right? Like, you can bomb somebody with a drone, but if they come back at you with like some improvised device, you can call them terrorists, right? It's like you raise the bar for actually, accomplishing a similar thing to the point where only you can do it and the others can't.
Now, I want to bring something to back to the sort of the view that has never really left my mind, but as the news ebbs and flows, and as our eyeballs start to focus attention onto the newest shiny thing in front of us, we are always getting distracted and forgetting things that happened in just the recent past. And if you recall, during the COVID times, there was an event in Canada where a large number of truckers and other people gathered in a city square, and they were calling it the Trucker Convoy, and they were honking their horns for many hours, and as a protest against the government's lockdowns and other rules during the COVID time period. The freedom encroaching
mandate, for what it's worth.
What was that?
They were protesting the obligation to get vaccinated, even though many of them were, but they did not like.
Well, I believe that was included, but there was like a larger list of grievances as well.
And even if they weren't listed, there was a lot of insults during COVID that I'm sure drove the anger.
Now, there was only one sort of reaction from the Canadian government, and that was, we will not tolerate this protest. Now, here in the United States, we had the George Floyd protests, where we remember that there were buildings set on fire. There was violence in the streets. There was weeks and weeks of violent protests. There was Seattle. There was 8 blocks of Seattle that was called Chaz, the autonomous zone. That's what the AZ was. It was the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. And Alex, if I'm not mistaken, you were not involved, but you were in the area where that incident occurs.
We've talked about this here. My my startup at the time, our office where I was working, shared a wall with a police department that got taken over. So all the photos where they show the main streets of Chaz, I can point you to the door. That is our office.
So in the United States, we had largely
my car got spray painted too, right? Even though I don't live in my house is not in that area. There was the zone of unlawfulness was actually far wider than the 8 blocks.
In the United States, we had a phenomenon where we were told for many, many months that we had to social distance, that we had to stay inside, we had to remain masked, and we were not supposed to be gathering outside, that everyone needed to sort of largely stay indoors and only travel outside, when absolutely necessary. Everyone was doing DoorDash because that was how we were gonna do things for a while. Everyone might remember that if they actually stretch their brains and go, oh yeah, I remember those crazy times. But then suddenly the George Floyd protests had thousands and thousands of people congregating in the streets, and the mainstream media in the United States said that this was an acceptable risk because the racism that was more of a crime, and dealing with the racism that was in the justice system as symbolized by George Floyd's death was something worthy of protest. So the risks of COVID.
And you'd think that they, if racism is the real pandemic, they would have enforced social distancing, but no, they wanted everybody to get together.
So we had a situation in the United States where the lawlessness and the protests were approved of by the mainstream media and the Democratic Party in large. They were kneeling. There was a lot of kneeling going on as sort of an honor or a tribute to the protesters, saying that, we're on your side. But in Canada, the truckers were doing a protest after the George Floyd protest. So they were taking on the spirit of the time, saying that protest is a valid thing to do to air your grievances. And the Canadian government said, no, we are going to stop you by any means necessary, which included, and the reason I'm bringing this up in juxtaposed to the talk of the EU discussion, is that the governments will use many mechanisms to stop you from having your expression afforded to you, including removing your ability to make a living. And this is a Twitter space that I recorded at the time, where a member, a sort of a policy wonk, who was not a member of government but was in a nonprofit organization that did a lot of work with the government with respect to the banking sector, was giving an explanation of some of the rules that the Canadian government was enacting, and warning people about the threats. If in particular, it was people who were donating to the trucker convoy via Give, Send, Go, a sort of GoFundMe clone that was not shutting down the funding for the convoy, unlike GoFundMe was.
Thank you for inviting me up to speak. As I've mentioned before, I do live in Ottawa, and as Clinton mentioned, I do work in the field of anti-corruption. I'm an ambassador for the wordily named Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption. So of all the things that have surprised me about these protests, the most surprising is that, one, they've made Ottawa interesting, and two, they've made my profession interesting. But I think that, I'm going to start carrying a sign saying, make Ottawa dull again. But in terms of the questions that you were asking about FinTrack, this is very serious. It is very serious. In broad terms, it means that, in the first instance, fundraising platforms will be brought under the discipline of FinTrack, much like banks. I should explain what FinTrack is. It's a government agency whose job is to oversee financial institutions and financial transactions to prevent things like money laundering, terrorist financing, kleptocracy, basically the illegal movement of funds. And as Jennifer mentioned, banks already have significant FinTrack requirements. They have to know their customer, they have to report large transactions, they have to be alert to the possibility that money that is going in or out of the bank might have the fingerprints or the telltale signs that something illicit or illegitimate is going on. Until now, fundraising platforms like GoFundMe and Give, Send, Go have not been covered by FinTrack. Some of the partners that they've used, so the banks and the credit card companies that they might use, have been covered, but the platforms themselves have not. And that's why it's been possible for anonymous contributions to be made, not just to the protests, but by anything that's set up on these platforms, and why it's possible for foreign money to much more easily be flowed into Canadian political activities and other activities. And that has now ended, and that is serious for the fundraising platforms themselves. I suspect that some of the smaller ones like Give, Send, Go will say that they are not going to do business in Canada anymore rather than comply with the law. because the laws they will require a much closer relationship between the platforms and much higher level of scrutiny by the platforms of people who are donating money. It also means that the banks themselves must scrutinize money that is going into their accounts to see if they are connected to people involved with the convoy. What that phrase connected means is not yet clear, but it is definitely going to be scrutinizing their accounts, not just for foreign money coming into Canada, but for any money that's coming into those accounts if they're being used to support the convoys. The banks will also be required to report their findings to the RCMP and to CSIS, the National Intelligence Agency. The banks also will be empowered to make a decision to freeze the accounts of anyone who is involved in the convoys. And that, of course, is serious. It's very serious. It means that it's possible for people who have played leadership roles in the convoy to wake up tomorrow and suddenly their money isn't gone, but they have no access to it. They won't be able to pay any of their bills. They won't be able to withdraw any of their funds until there's some sort of unspecified hearing. More seriously still, if you're involved in this convoy and your bank takes this decision now that they have to freeze your accounts, that they have to report to the RCMP and CSIS, when the Emergency Act expires in 30 days, there's no guarantee that your bank is going to want you as a client after that. And in fact, Canadian financial institutions are very conservative. And by conservative, I don't mean right-wing, I mean very, very cautious. It's likely that if during this 30-day period they identify someone and find that they have to freeze his account, that they report him to CSIS, they are not going to want to do business with that person after the 30 days. It's likely that once you're on their list, no bank will want to do business with you. That means no bank account, no credit card, no mortgage, no loans. I'm not sure how. I can only hope that this will be applied sparingly and judiciously, because it is very difficult to survive in a 21st century society if you have no access to banking and no access to domestic instruments to finance your life or to make payments, even if you have money. I guess if I'm not sure that anyone involved in this protest is going to take any advice from me, but I do mean this sincerely when I say that you may feel a reflex action if you feel this is unjust to just say, I'm going to defy it. I would advise you to think very, very carefully about whether this is a price that you are prepared to pay, because it.
So, Alex, I'm bringing that up because if you can just take what we were discussing about the EU and each of the individual states sort of partaking in this extreme clampdown on speech, including true speech, things that are true, but just, not beneficial to the things that they have as goals as a government, and apply it to these mechanisms.
As a minor inset to this conversation, what is harmed by a true fact? Could another true fact be harmed, or is it perhaps a fact that is not true? Right?
Well,
like, you don't protect truths by banning truths.
They're correct. You don't protect them, but the goal is not necessarily to protect them. It is to protect outcomes. So, Alex, if you and I get into a fight and I punch you and you punch me, but the reporting is that you punched me, and that's a fact, you punched me, but the omitted detail is that I punched you. The narrative is able to be shaped despite the fact that only true things are being stated. If everyone is repeating that you punched me, that is a true statement. So the truth is being stated, but the implications of that truth are distorted, right? The omission is that I punched you, and therefore the story that unfolds is.
So that the thing I was thinking about is when through the Twitter files we learned that they were sort of knowingly saying, yes, there are vaccine side effects and there are people who are having terrible consequences from being vaccinated, but we have to delete those messages from social media.
Yes,
even if they're
because
true.
it could cause hesitancy. It could cause hesitancy.
Exactly.
It's
but
right.
But that, why is that, right? Because it was going against a claim that the vaccines are safe.
Yes, they picked the most absurd, the most absurd extreme position to hold, and they had to maintain that come hell or high water, which we just recently saw them sort of bring back when they ran the articles alarmed by the internal memo they leaked. They got leaked that said that they had identified 10 people who died from the vaccines, right? We saw, the histamine response that they all had by going like, oh my God, how could you even say that it's even possible that someone was harmed by this? This is outrageous, right? Like they were all up in arms and demanding the most amount of evidence for this claim.
And to some degree, those people have never heard of anything like this. Do you understand me? Like they've never been exposed to this, and not for lack of that information existing or being shared by the people who had happened to them, but because they were prevented from spreading that information in certain circles, right? If you looked it up, like you and me did, that's one thing, but there are a lot of people out there, and a lot, probably each one of us knows several, who basically have no idea about it, right? They were kept in a virgin state of mind because of this censorship, and now they can be shocked when the FDA says, what, some people die. I mean, 10 children is, each child is a tragedy, but as a total number is nothing compared to what is probably out there.
Well, 10 by now, 10 by now, 10 by now is actually oddly below Sam Harris's randomly chosen number of 12 that he could have imagined. Like back when he was when he had a podcast with what's his face from Harvard? His name is escaping me at the moment. Yes, Christakis. He was. They had just sort of like randomly thrown out the number of 12 people, maybe just throwing it out there. That they had. So that's even 10 is even underneath Sam Harris's randomly pulled out of his ass number of 12. And so, but you could see that the whole system is sort of geared towards making sure that the conclusions they want people to walk away with are protected and are not at threat by any details that might require additional scrutiny. So it is better to suppress things that might be true if they require nuance and clarification, because the nuance and clarification is just too complicated to have to deal with, right? So they don't want them to get out at all.
Or less charitably, and these people don't deserve charity. They sort of know where this conversation goes. Honestly, if you start, digging and you find 1, you find 10, you find 100, you find 1,000. Well, before you know it, you're a raging anti-vaxxer. We just can't have that. I think that's the real.
There's a classic result in cognitive science, where, depending on the way that a quantification is phrased, can affect a person's reasoning about the quantification. So if you express something in terms of lives saved or in terms of lives lost, the framing of that sort of dynamic, even if the numerics are identical between the two framings, can affect the way that someone becomes risk averse or less risk averse in their decision-making process. And this type of science guides a lot of what the policymakers writ large decide they want to do with their language, to the point where if something winds up being true but phrased in a way they don't like, they will pounce on it. They will try to suppress it because they don't go ahead.
To be clear, that whole space of quote-unquote science has come under intense scrutiny, to say the least.
Well, sure, yes.
And I would put a massive asterisk over that whole sort of behavioral.
Whether or not the result
they do believe it,
is true. Yes, they believe it. Okay, so it does drive a lot of their motivations for how they decide to carry out public policy.
Really, actually, you're touching on something really important, and that this has been like troubling me for a long time. I think the problem here, and it is also echoed in that paper from 2020 that you read an excerpt of, is the concept of your mind as a battleground where you are a passive sort of, not even observer, like you're an object being thrown around by, these information weapons that are being, thrown around like billiard balls. You're like the you're the black ball just being rolled around, by all the other balls. and sort of have no control over your own agency or anything like that. So we must protect you from being influenced by other things. And by the way, not by teaching you to think critically, right? Not by actually actively sort of helping you to get better at not falling for this. No, we're going to prevent it from reaching you. Because why cure when you can prevent, right? I guess. So that's where we are, and I genuinely think even when Elon says, oh, the wokeness mind virus, like the concept of the mind virus, like think about what that means, right? Like you are just sitting there and getting it. Like, how do you get a flu? Well, you just get it, right? There's like very little you can do. Okay, so this concept of like the people are these passive, land that is being captured by hostile means. Everything that comes out of that conception leads here, because if that is true, then you have to come to this conclusion that you have to take proactive measure in the, as they call it, in the gray zone, right? In the not stopping legal things from not stopping illegal things, but actually stopping legal things.
So there's a
information space, quote unquote, right?
There is a I'll call it a mental pathology, and it's going to separate, I believe, people like you and I from the people that we are currently criticizing. Okay, and
good.
There is you and I seem to approach certain things where we can identify an action that we specifically say is wrong. We can say this action is wrong, and we believe, let's say that this is a legitimate place for the government to say that something should be a crime. This action is a crime. But when you encounter that the crime still occurs after you declare it a crime, okay, there is a set of people who wish to go further down what you might say is the causal chain, or an indirect causal chain, to then make the things that are downstream that might lead to a larger correlation between the activity that is a crime, and make those things also illegal, right? Clamp down on those activities, where you and I stop at the crime is the thing itself, and that is the thing that is legitimate to try to, to penalize people for, to punish people for, and that everything downstream of that is legal, right? If you want to stop it, if you think that one thing has a tendency to lead to another, maybe you can solve that in the social and cultural layer, but you don't make a thing that should otherwise be legal a crime just because there's a probability that the person who does it might commit a crime later, right?
Yep.
But there are people who don't hold that, and they will chase an endless sequence of precursor events until they squash out finally the incidence of the crime, right?
Well, I mean, that's how we won the war on drugs, though. Think about it.
Yes. But do you
we don't have fentanyl today?
Do you think that sort of landscape has some value? Because that's how I view a lot of things. I view that type of dynamic.
It's true. It's just that once you get to that point, you realize that like that kind of reasoning is everywhere, right? Like when you say like, oh, it's an aggravated crime because you did it while calling the other one a bad name, right, or whatever. Like, or if you do it over the internet, it's wire fraud. It's not just calling people bad names or whatever, or going to a URL that is available but not password protected but not indexed, right? That is not like okay. Sure, no, it is a wire crime or whatever they call it. And they've got these sort of add-ons that can turn things that are normally normal, but they're done in a context that is somehow enhanced and criminally enhanced. I mean, in a certain sense, it's how you don't have a lot of precursors for drugs available as chemicals, right? Even though they're chemicals that are very useful for all sorts of things, you can't get them because they are precursors. What I'm saying is the philosophy of this goes in all sorts of directions and is extremely widespread, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was to scan the archives of our conversations and would find us sort of alluding to such principles before, because it's just so in the water. But
so I think
long story short, the point is, I guess here's the thing, right? To do something like what you describe, where you go for the precursors, right? What are you really doing? You are asserting that you know that if you stop this node, that other node will stop. And the more nodes you go back in this sort of graph of causality, the more side effects you have. And you are not taking any responsibility for any of that, right? Like, what about the drug that was not discovered because this precursor was not available for somebody to experiment with?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, like, who cares, right? No. This is the war on drugs, man. Like, yeah, sorry.
Well,
so
I could make a very convoluted statement and say that it all boils down to the crime of doing regression analysis, but that's
right. But you are correct though. It is about creating this illusion in your head that you can model reality, and therefore by then rewinding your own thinking, right? Not reality, but now your mind. Which supposedly has a map of reality that you are convinced is correct, lol. You can then play it forward several ways and figure out what should be altered in order for what you want not to happen. And the problem is nobody ever checks, right? Nobody's like, look, we're going to stop the importation of ephedrine because it is a precursor for I love
ephedrine. Ephedrine is so great.
Random drugs, random substances.
No, ephedrine is a wonderful one. I love ephedrine. It keeps me alive most days.
Is that the diabetes thing?
No, ephedrine is just a stimulant. It's just a class of stimulant.
Okay, never mind then. Something else. But you sort of you don't say, like, even forgetting the side effects, right? You don't say, and we will check in a year to see if it did anything, and if it didn't, we'll revert the ban. Right? Nobody does that. Like, this does not get applied to any law.
You beg for too much, because even when they do something and it doesn't have the effect they say, they will just come up with something that stopped it from having its intended effect.
Right. We needed was more precursors.
So this is my classic example. When Barack Obama came into the White House, there was the 2008 financial crisis, and there was a policy that they wanted to do, this giant sort of bailout situation. They had an economic plan that where they released graphs about the unemployment rate if they don't do this huge economic package, and the employment rate over time if they do this package. And they had projections and everything. And they did the plan, and none of the projections of the unemployment rate panned out to match. If you follow the graph that they proposed and then you follow the actual history, you'll see that it wasn't even remotely close to recovering the employment rate like they said it would be. Like, the employment rate skyrocketed higher after they did the plan than they said it would be if the plan wasn't enacted. So the employment rate skyrocketed and took far longer to recover than they had said it would, even if they didn't do the plan. And so when confronted with this fact that not only was the plan enacted and none of their projections matched, it was even, the results were worse than had we done nothing according to the projections. They just said, oh, yeah, that's because the situation was actually worse than we knew. But imagine how bad it would have been if we didn't do the package, right? So you can just...
2 weeks to stop the spread, right? Was it 2 weeks? No, actually, it went a lot longer. Did it stop?
Oh, it's because
we all got COVID.
What we did was always great.
Success? Of course, it was.
It was perfect.
It was the most successful public health intervention of all time. How dare you?
Because imagine what would have happened if we didn't do it, right?
We would all have gotten double COVID.
There is almost no circumstance I have ever really seen where that type of verbal logic, that linguistic sort of logic wouldn't work, right? Imagine what would have happened, right? Even because we would say consider that your policy made it worse, right? Or didn't have had the opposite effect that you thought it would. We would say that, but they would just go, no, of course it had the effect that we said it would have, but the situation was just worse. We didn't know. We had bad measuring tools at the time.
And then they follow it up with trust the science.
Well, all the experts agree. All the serious experts agree, at least.
Yeah. No, the joke is because, in a sense, you now admit that your previous projections were terrible. You're currently making assertions that have no evidence behind them, and therefore,
But yes, Alex,
more of what we did. Yeah.
you personally don't have better.
Well,
there's their trump card.
I convince you I have better. So really, in
Correct.
your mind, you're safe.
Because you're not an expert. I'm going to open this up. If anyone wants to comment, go ahead and request to speak. If you want to talk about anything we've discussed so far or tangential aspects, go ahead. I'm going to talk about something that we should keep focus on from a couple weeks ago as I transition to another large story for the week. Alex, do you have anything that you want to put the closing end on this current conversation?
I wanted to, I want to bring up that Wikipedia quote I gave you, which I know you were reticent about, but I thought it was just so perfect. Such a perfect encapsulation of a big element. Do you want to sort of, so actually, let me share a little bit more. So as I put that tweet originally up for, going after Ursula von der Leyen, somebody attempted to put a community note on my tweet saying that Jacques Baud has said a lot of really, really bad things, which started my saying that I've really never been in a debate where the people who are are coming up against you are somehow agreeing with you. They're like, oh yeah, he said bad things. Yes, I know. I know he said things you don't like. Like that's what I said. You're not actually adding any information. But one of the articles they were linking to was the Wikipedia page that was that is in the name of Jacques Baud. And in there, I just found one piece that was, to me, just, I don't know, it encapsulated so much. I just I just had to bring it up. Gator, do you want to kind of read quickly that sort of?
I'll have to pull it back up because I didn't include it.
I'll read it.
Okay.
I'll find it. Wikipedia, Jacques Baud. So basically, he clearly is a man of erudite opinion. But one of my favorite things is basically the second. It has an intro, the biography, and then the next paragraph is called Conspiracy Theory and Disinformation. And it starts saying, in 2009, Jacques Baud stated that Osama bin Laden was not involved in the September 11, 2001 attacks, and quotes him, saying, even today, it is impossible to demonstrate that bin Laden was indeed at the origin of September 11. Today, the Americans still do not classify the Taliban as a terrorist organization and have officially abandoned the hunt for bin Laden. Now, clearly he was wrong that they had officially abandoned the quest for the hunt for bin Laden. However, listen carefully to what happened here. They said, he has stated that Osama bin Laden was not involved in the September 11, 2001 attacks. Okay, so if I tell you that somebody has stated this, what do you expect them to have said that would be in that umbrella? Maybe they said, like, he had nothing to do with it, man, or that wasn't him, or no, that he had nothing to do with it, or something like that, right? Instead, what he says is, it is impossible to demonstrate that bin Laden was indeed at the origin of September 11. So he is saying the evidence is not sufficient for me to be convinced of your claim that he was at the origin or whatever. And the way they articulate this is he has stated that Osama was not involved. So his expression that the evidence is insufficient is transmuted in their minds to a statement that the evidence is sufficient to support the opposite position, which happens to me a lot when I say, like, hey, your claims that ivermectin doesn't work are based on bad data. And people will be like, oh, you're pro-ivermectin. I'm like, no, your claims are based on bad data. What does that have to do? And they put all of this under the heading of him spreading disinformation. By the first two lines, literally, they're committing a logical fallacy that, like, by definition, consists false information without needing to look at anything else. Like, literally, the foundation for their claim does not support their claim, and they put it right in front of you. So yeah, this is I don't know. There's something really delicious to me about this, where you go out saying, like, people should be more cautious about what they believe, and you might agree with him, you might not agree with him, and I don't frankly remember what the information space was like in 2009, and he might have been completely wrong. But none of that matters in this particular situation, because he said that this did not happen, and you have him saying the evidence that this happened is it's very thin. Okay.
let's try to make it I don't do analogies that often, but I think there is parallel situation that could make it clear in a contemporaneous context. And that is the difference between the statement that the boats that the United States government are blowing up from Venezuela, the statement they are not drug boats, versus I haven't seen any evidence they are drug boats. There's a difference. Saying conclusively they are not versus I haven't actually seen anything other than people claiming, right? Like I've not seen any evidence, or there isn't evidence presented that says they are.
Correct. Actually, now that you mention this, I don't know why this is not going to sound connected, but I do feel for the sake of completeness, we do need to state something more, which is that this particular space, and you and me in particular, have made a lot of sort of conversation and sort of broadcast around the situations where the Trump administration is censoring free speech. So if somebody's thinking that we're going after, the Canadians or the Europeans because they're libs and whatever, and, if this is happening on the other side, we wouldn't say anything about it. Well, we don't have to think of the counterfactual, because we can think of the factual, which is that it did happen, and we did talk about it a lot. And to your credit, I will say that, you initially were skeptical about the case of Mahmoud Khalil, which we spent quite a bit of time on. And by the end of, our sort of several weeks of sort of following the story, you're like, yeah, no, this is completely straight up censorship. There's nothing.
I never saw them present the case that I thought would be their strongest had they had the.
So you said he never did anything, right? Is that what you did, Gator? Anyway, yes. But just so we're clear, that this is not a sort of a partisan issue, and to maybe put a bow on the whole story, unfortunately, this also means that it's not like one party is, the bad guys, and if the other party wins, we're going to do better, which, to my shame, I kind of thought maybe was the case. Unfortunately, it is about what truths each party, or, well, what supposed truths, what false truths, mistruths, whatever, each political faction wants to defend versus the other.
I will say though that the Democrats across the last several decades have been far more insidious in their the way that they infect the political system with the controls that they want to have. The Republicans thus far in the modern times have been much more crude and blunt with their application of the.
Yeah, they're less sophisticated, at least it seems, about it. But it's still effective. It still works. And I just want to make it super clear for anybody who's listening to us that our primary concern is freedom of speech, because that's how we keep all of them accountable. We're not them. We're we, right? We're normal people living our lives and raising our children and wanting a better life for them. And to me, the crux of all of it is, are we going to be able to talk about what we're seeing and what we're thinking and what we are observing and what we are deducing, even if we're wrong? Are we going to be able to have discourse, or are the people who want us to believe mistruths going to be able to prevent us from refuting them? Because really, that's ultimately how it goes. Censorship comes together with the actual official top-down disinformation, because the false information really can't survive very long in the wild without it being protected by a censorship apparatus. At least that's been my observation.
So now we're going to have a transitionary topic. And again, if anyone wants to comment on anything we've discussed so far, even if it's sort of parallel or tangential, go ahead and request to speak. We'll get you on up here.
Thank you, Gator, for humoring my the thing that's been driving me up the wall this whole last 2 weeks. It's like I had no idea about this, and then it just like hits me like a train, and somehow here we are.
Of course. The unfortunate part is that we have so much to talk about. We are not even going to scratch the surface of all the topics today. But there's one transitionary update that I want to do before we get into another big topic for this week. And that is a pipe bomb January 6th update. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about the arrest of the accused pipe bomber from January 6th. There were 2 pipe bombs that were placed, and we had discussed at one point, Alex, the fact that there was statements stating that the telemetry data from the cell phone towers was corrupted. or at least one of the providers of this telemetry data had corrupted information. And at the time that we were talking about it, we said we had no information about how it was that they suddenly fixed this problem of corrupted data and did all of the cross correlations that we said, because I had pointed out that to do a cross correlation and the triangulation with the data that you have is really not a question of the magnitude, because computers can do this stuff fairly quickly. So unless you fix something that was broken, really the really is an open question as to how we even accomplish this if they're claiming they didn't get any new information. So Wall Street Journal from the last couple weeks here. How a tech-savvy officer finally cracked the January 6th pipe bombs case. So we'll see if this gives us convincing information about what happened. When he was a popular conservative podcaster, Dan Bongino claimed he had uncovered the biggest scandal in FBI history. The Bureau knew who had placed 2 pipe bombs near the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, but was concealing the evidence because it was an inside job. Bongino learned something far different after becoming the Federal Bureau of Investigation's number 2 official this year. Investigators weren't hiding evidence, they just didn't realize they had it. For 4 years, a tranche of cell phone data provided to the FBI by T-Mobile sat on a digital shelf because investigators couldn't figure out how to read it. This is the corruption story that we had talked about. People familiar with the matter said, the data turned out to be essential to cracking the case, the people said, a breakthrough that happened only recently when a tech-savvy law enforcement officer wrote a new computer program that finally deciphered the information. That move led to the arrest of 30-year-old Brian Cole Jr. at his home in Northern Virginia, where he had been quietly living with his mother and other relatives. It was a surprising end to a cross-country manhunt that highlighted the possibilities and pitfalls of doing high-tech investigative work in an age in which Americans leave extensive digital trails every day. Though neither pipe bomb exploded on January 6th, the FBI deemed the devices placed at the headquarters of the Democratic and Republican National Committees viable, with the capacity to kill or severely injure innocent bystanders. The Bureau spared no resources in finding the culprit, using powerful digital tools that produced a sea of information so detailed that it surprised even longtime investigators who were no strangers to complicated manhunts. Agents studied thousands of pipe purchases at Home Depot stores across the country. They analyzed data from Google in an attempt to isolate any individuals who might have searched online for instructions on how to make pipe bombs and for directions to the RNC and DNC. They examined who had paid for parking in the area and explored whether a rented home from Airbnb or VRBO might have been used as a staging ground in preparation for planting the pipe bombs. Authorities said the leads didn't produce a suspect, but unexpectedly led them to an unrelated concern, a teenager in Georgia whose Home Depot purchases raised alarm. The FBI alerted local police, who found a cache of weapons during a search of the teen's home in 2021. Agents also tried a more traditional approach. A tipster in the southern U.S. recalled overhearing a conversation that seemed to connect a local woman to pipe bombs. The FBI thought the lead was promising enough to launch an undercover investigation, people familiar with it said, with a covert agent befriending the woman's significant other to elicit new clues. But the operation was a bust. Weeks before President Trump took office in January, the FBI shared previously unreleased surveillance footage that showed the suspect wearing a pair of distinctive black and gray Nike Air Max Speed Turf shoes on the night he placed the bombs. The effort yielded no fruitful tips. In the first days as deputy director in March, Bongino ordered a briefing on the bombs and declared solving the case one of his priorities, enlisting the help of new investigators. Increasingly desperate and under pressure to make progress, supervisors urged agents and analysts to take a new look at what they had, including the data from T-Mobile, reflecting phone locations based on internet usage that investigators had set aside years earlier. Once investigators were finally able to read the data, they said it led them to Cole's phone number because his cell phone's movements tracked what investigators had seen in surveillance footage. A T-Mobile spokeswoman declined to comment. With that knowledge in hand, the feds said they were able to fill in the blanks. A search of Cole's bank account and credit card records indicated that he made a series of purchases, including several Home Depot locations in Northern Virginia. The purchases matched the components of the bombs: galvanized pipes, 9-volt battery connectors, a white kitchen-style timer, electrical wire, and steel wool, among other things court records show. In a 4-hour interview with investigators, Cole acknowledged placing the bombs. People familiar with the probe said. He expressed support for Trump and said he embraced conspiracy theories regarding Trump's 2020 election loss, the People said. He had thrown out the Air Max sneakers, he said. Cole hasn't entered a plea, and his lawyers didn't respond to requests for comment. So I guess they uncorrupted the data if it was actually corrupted or whatnot. But, I'd be curious to know what the level of type of corruption was and what this algorithm supposedly was, because this isn't, completely unfamiliar to me. So the story lacks detail that gives me real intuition as to what they did. But there's the update. They sat on T-Mobile data for 4 years, and no one could figure it out. They didn't have any elite hackers.
Yes, sure. So just for people to understand what it might mean that data is corrupted and you can't get to it, I will say something that maybe 5% of people here will understand, but for the people who will understand what I mean. My co-founder at Balena had installed BTRFS on his Linux machine and Bcache on top of that, which then proceeded to completely destroy the indexes of his and possibly the actual the data itself of his file system. But in that file system, he had a lot of information that he wanted. Now, you can say that it is completely stupid to put an experimental file system on, your keys and other very important information that you care about.
You only live once.
And he then spent months reverse engineering the on-disk format of BTRFS in order to regain access to his files, which he did. That it's called being a crazy person, but you can sort of see what I mean, Gator. I think maybe you understood most of the words I said.
Yeah.
What it means to sit down and reverse engineer whatever BTRFS is doing to encode your information on a hard drive, and how it was corrupted and then proceed to uncorrupt it.
I've reverse engineered so many things in my life.
Yes, so that is difficult. What these bozos did might be anything from discovering a password to a zip file to I don't know, realizing that their text files were shipped without an extension, and so they had to right-click open with Notepad or something. It could be anything. It really could be anything.
It really could be anything. It could have been, it could have been a compression format that they weren't familiar with. It could have been, like there's a type of corruption that is non-uniform. It is non-predictable. And then there are other types of corruption where it is sort of a uniform and predictable type of corruption. And, there's many gradients in between, but like the manner in which something is corrupted really does matter. There are types of files and let's say packing mechanisms where the information that is needed to reconstruct the material from its packing is lost. And therefore you almost really can't unless you start to really analyze the contents of what you have.
You can get into cryptanalysis effectively.
Right. So, I mean, there are many complications, but I would be really, really curious to find out what the type was, because the way that the article says it, a casual reader might come across with the impression that it was sophisticated. But my initial reaction is everyone was using off the shelf tools, and nobody fucking had any idea what they were doing.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
So there is a telecommunications provider, correct? And you ask them for some information, which they provide to you. Mm-hmm. And your attempts to gain access to that information are unsuccessful for whatever reason. What is the reasonable thing that you, as a public servant, would do in such a complicated situation?
I guarantee you I'm law enforcement, and the federal law enforcement at that. I'm pretty sure I could convince the mobile company to either give me the provider of the software, their information, who generated the data, so that I could contact their engineers to try to understand how we might be able to unscramble the data,
or just send somebody,
or if it's proprietary,
to your office to do it.
Well, I'm saying, or if it's proprietary, ask T-Mobile to send their engineers, right? Like, because maybe T-Mobile is using a third-party distributor
this should not require. If I ask you for information and you give me something that I cannot access, I come back to you and say, no, give me the information. I don't care that whatever you're doing here is obscure or whatever. Give it to me in a way that I can read it. Otherwise, you haven't given it to me. Thanks. That's it.
Right.
You're the man with the guns. What does uncorrupting have to do with anything?
Yeah. Right. So I mean, that's the update.
My homework type shit. You know what I mean? Like, well, it was. Well, they did give it to us, but it was like corrupted.
I will say,
what could we do?
At a minimum, the Chekhov's gun that was placed in Act 1, which was, there was corrupted data, does have a gun firing by Act 3. We do have a story that says they fixed the problem, right? At least that loose end has, a story out there that exists, right? And it's an answered question to the degree that there's an article saying that they solved it. At least that.
I mean, to be precise, yeah. Frankly, in the beginning, the way they were, the statements were being made, it wasn't super clear that the person that was arrested on the basis of that data that was claimed to have been deleted. Mm-hmm. Because it was, as you said, it's just one provider. So presumably all the other providers are still there. And, lo and behold, apparently the guilty party was using that one provider's network.
Well, okay. I mean, listen, we are notorious for being in the conspiracy theory realm. So how about we expand this conspiracy theory that nobody else, in a way nobody else has, and say that the data that they got from T-Mobile was corrupted because Mr. Cole himself has people on the inside who made sure that they corrupted it when handing it over to the FBI so that he could get away with it.
Right. Oh man.
See?
Very social for
nobody's thought of that angle.
Yep.
All right. Yep. We're gonna move on here to the next big story.
Miss no, you first, please.
No, you.
I just wanted to tell you that.
Yeah.
I found the Epstein file.
Good. I was just going to ask you about the Epstein file.
Were you really? Isn't that funny? We were both going to say the same thing.
That's funny.
This is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that doesn't end.
So, of course, there is hundreds of thousands of documents released according to the new law. Now, not all the documents were released on time, so we're expecting more and more tranches of documents to be released in the Epstein files, but they were released according to the law just in time for Christmas week.
They are releasing them as fast as they can redact them, okay?
Well, we will get to all of that, but we will start off with the most important news update.
News in the Jeffrey Epstein case tonight. Newly released court files have been combed through by investigators and journalists, and one name you won't find anywhere in those pages is Dr. RollerGator.
So Dr. RollerGator is still not in any of the Epstein files. That is
I'm
accurate.
happy to hear you made sure that those redactions were done correctly.
Yes, there is no traces of Dr. RollerGator in any of these files.
No evidence of Dr. RollerGator, which is not to say that he's not in there, but we have no evidence of it.
Yes, they are different statements. However, I do maintain that I'm not in them. In there, I will not be in them. So I just want to make that clear. That's the most important piece of news out of this week. So we got a lot to go into because holy Lord, did it set fires across the internet this week. And we're going to start off with one of the biggest blunders that occurred in the in the releases. New York Times, redacted material in some Epstein files is easily recovered. Portions of some files released from the Justice Department's investigation of Jeffrey Epstein, disgraced financier and convicted sex offender, were not properly redacted digitally, with some censored information easily revealed by copying and pasting blacked out text into a separate file. Now, as an aside, for people who may not know, the PDF format has many ways of carrying out things, but the Adobe software in particular has very specific redaction processes that do not leave traces as you go through its redaction process, do not leave traces of the text. You get the black bars, but the text is actually gone behind them. And anyone who has done any work coordinating with even local governments who have still legal requirements to do redactions from time to time, particularly in the state-by-state version of Freedom of Information Acts. Each state sort of has their own type of FOIA law. Like New York, for example, has something they call FOIL, Freedom of Information Law. So they have their own versions of it. Each state sort of has it. Pennsylvania has something called the Right to Know law. But they also have redaction standards. And every single small government agency within the states all have to meet these requirements because they are all beholden usually to the state's Freedom of Information laws. And redaction is an everyday common practice, and any single one of those agencies who has to deal with the Freedom of Information laws has lawyers involved at some points in time to verify that redactions are done, according to the law. And any single one of them could tell you how to do it appropriately. And the fact that the U.S. government botched this is particularly hilarious on this particular case.
I mean, it makes one think that whoever, this is a case of malicious compliance, basically. Whoever was told to do it botched it because
my actual hypothesis is simply that they released documents that were still in a precursor redaction phase and did not actually get the final redaction done mistakenly. Like, people mistakenly thought a batch of files were fully redacted when they were only like suggested redactions waiting for a second
like
pair
that
of eyes.
Video from Epstein's cell that was released.
Yeah. The information from the failed redactions surfaced by the New York Times shed no additional light on the well-documented ties between President Trump and Mr. Epstein. But it showed more examples of how Mr. Epstein carried out his abuse and concealed his money through financial and corporate structures, and the ease of recovering the material suggested that at least a few materials in the trove of documents released by the Justice Department were hastily censored, which supports my central hypothesis that they were preliminary redactions.
Well, we know one batch of the documents. I don't know if you know this, Gator, but maybe it's in your story already. But one batch of the documents was discovered as a URL on the website without being indexed. So they were truly not ready.
One such failed redaction occurred in a civil suit against the executors of Mr. Epstein's estate, filed in the Virginia Islands in 2021. According to the redacted portion of the civil suit, revealed through copying and pasting into another document, one of the executors, Darren K. Indicke, signed a check from Mr. Epstein's foundation to an immigration lawyer who was, quote, involved in one or more forced marriages arranged among Epstein's victims. Chad Gilmartin, a spokesman for the Justice Department, said the failed redactions had been applied by parties in the civil litigation. The Justice Department, Mr. Gilmartin said, simply reproduced the materials which were collected to be part of the Epstein files. The Guardian reported earlier on some of the documents' redactions being undone. President Trump last month signed a bill into law promising the release of all files related to the Epstein investigation, as well as transparency around their release. The bill said that no documents could be redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. And boy, did that produce fruit. It granted exceptions for redactions in a number of situations, including where victims' personal information could be compromised. Quote, the only redactions being applied to the documents are those required by law, full stop. Todd Blanche, I'm issuing an executive order right now, Alex, that bans the phrase full stop from being included in any adult over the age of 18's sentences.
Full stop.
Thank you.
Or, no. Okay, sorry.
there are trends, cultural trends that really just need to be over and done with already, and full stop is one of them. So there's the oopsie on the redactions, which I have my hypothesis on, but there may be multiple explanations, not all mutually exclusive. And there's going to be some now that we're going to talk about that are going to be the most widely discussed aspects of the releases so far, and they are going to mostly center around Donald Trump. Washington Post: Epstein file includes child porn complaint a decade before federal investigation. Justice Department files related to deceased sexual offender Jeffrey Epstein released Friday included a 1996 complaint to the FBI about the disgraced financier allegedly possessing and distributing child pornography about a decade before a federal investigation was launched into his predatory behavior with minors and young women. The complaint was brought by Maria Farmer, who worked for Epstein in the 1990s and has for years said she told police and federal investigators that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had sexually abused her. The FBI had never publicly acknowledged her original report. The complaint states that Farmer, whose name is blacked out throughout the document, took pictures of her sisters, 12 and 16 years, for her own personal artwork, and that Epstein stole the photos and negatives and is believed to have sold the pictures to potential buyers. The document indicates Epstein threatened that if the complainant, Farmer, told anyone about the photos, quote, he will burn her house down, and that Epstein asked Farmer, then in her mid-20s, quote, to take pictures of young girls at swimming pools. The complaint is stamped with the date September 3rd, 1996. Farmer said in a statement that she feels redeemed that the new tranche of files released by the Justice Department includes documentation of her original complaint. Quote, this is one of the best days of my life. Of course, it's mixed with the fact that I'm devastated about all the other little girls like Virginia Guffrey, who were harmed because the FBI didn't do their job, Farmer said in a statement. I'm crying for two reasons. I want everyone to know that I'm shedding tears of joy for myself, but also tears of sorrow for all of the victims the FBI failed. The FBI declined to comment. Now, Alex, are there any questions that come to your mind immediately from reading this? Because there is something that, you know, I don't, this is not me trying to find ways to defend Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not pulling a Michael Tracy here, but there is something that stands out to me, and I don't know if it stands out to you.
What, that she took photos of her sisters?
Yeah, and that somehow calling it personal artwork is a quality that grants them.
While I do understand where you're coming from, I'm also a parent of little boys who we tend to take photos of them. And in some cases, you know, they're not in full attire.
Sure. No,
and
but
I'm like, holy shit, if somebody sees this, but this is very different from, you know, what, you know, obviously I see my boys.
Young children, let's say 5 years of age and under are typically, you know, there's photos, at least in the 80s, it was a regular practice to have photos of children in the bathtub, right? There are nude gator photos out there.
In many families, yes.
Right. Okay. There are nude photos of Dr. RollerGator as a baby in the bathtub, and it wasn't a sexual activity, and that's a normal practice. But took pictures of her sisters 12 and 16 years. So the question that comes to my mind for her own personal artwork. So the question that comes to my mind is immediately, were these nude photos? And this is a very specific nuance of law where under certain circumstances, the act of someone under the age of 18 being nude in a photograph does not make it child pornography in and of itself, which is not me attempting to find ways of mounting a defense for, you know, Jeffrey Epstein here. Is simply me trying to understand the stories that I'm reading in the news to try to understand how we get the headline that he was going to be, that he was being complained about for possessing child pornography when the same material possessed by the complainant would hypothetically not be child pornography, right? So this is a very confusing sort of scenario that I don't have clarification on. And if anyone does have the nuance that explains the situation to me, I would like to know, because that just raises questions to me right there about the nature of the material. What would the nature of this material be that would transfer it from not being pornographic in nature when in possession of the person who took it, which is this woman who filed the complaint, but then suddenly make it child pornography in possession of Jeffrey Epstein? Now, I can understand the idea that Jeffrey Epstein took photos that were, let's say, revealing and used them for his own inappropriate purposes, but that would not be the nature of the material itself being illegal or untoward. It would be his mind that would make it untoward. There is a class of video on YouTube that has become rather controversial over the last decade or so, which are families abusing their own children by taking video of them doing gymnastics in scantily clad leotards, and basically knowing that the audience watching this is a class of pedophiles who up their viewership and therefore give them ad revenue and things like that, even though they're watching material that goes, is in line with YouTube standards, but of course is being abused for untoward purposes by the audience. So is that this scenario? I don't know. And if anyone knows, I'd be happy to listen to the explanation of what turns the content into child pornography the moment it's in Jeffrey Epstein's hands, his supposed alleged threat to burn down her house notwithstanding. Farmer has said that she met Maxwell and Epstein when she was a graduate student in Manhattan in 1995, and that Epstein later hired her. Farmer claims that in the summer of 1996, she was sexually assaulted by Epstein and Maxwell at the Ohio estate of billionaire retail executive Leslie Wexner. Farmer has also said Maxwell sexually abused her sister, Annie, who was 15 years old at the time, on a massage table at the Epstein's New Mexico ranch. Lawyers for Farmer say she told the FBI in August 1996 she observed explicit images of children inside Epstein's home, a modeling book of child pornography that was kept in Epstein's safe, and Epstein's theft of nude images of her sisters. Farmer filed a lawsuit this May seeking damages from the federal government for what her lawyers say was federal authorities' negligence regarding her claims related to Epstein and Maxwell. After speaking to local and federal authorities in 1996, Farmer said no one appeared to act on her reports until 2006, when the FBI knocked on her door to interview her about Epstein. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges in Florida, one count of soliciting prostitution and one count of soliciting prostitution from someone under the age of 18, and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Under a secret and controversial arrangement, the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed to not prosecute Epstein for federal crimes related to allegations of sex with underage girls. So there's one story that came out of the released tranche there. Alex, any additional comments on that story there?
No, it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you wish it was less messy, but I think on some level this story has to be approached on the meta, right? Because any individual piece of information you can sort of nitpick and like work around and whatever. The real question in my mind is, why is the government doing all of this work to try and avoid releasing information on the, supposedly just the criminal, just the normal, criminal who is doing crimes? Like, they don't seem to generally care, but in this particular case, there is a lot of focus on protecting something. The reputation of Epstein, the victims, the other people, like everybody has a different story.
I will say that before we get
in the words of the Speaker of the House, everybody says something different, but like everybody's sort of clear that they're protecting something, and there's a lot of activity, and we're not clear what it is that is being protected. That's all, that is required for your hairs to be standing on end with all this shit that's going on. Like,
well,
yeah,
before we get deeper into this, and we get to the really sort of outrageous and hilarious aspect of this dump that occurred over Christmas. There is an argument to say that there are certain things that don't pass the threshold of inspection that are more relegated to the department of rumor that are now that people are likely to take as truth, as opposed to, you know, something more authoritative and investigated, and that the documents themselves don't appropriately differentiate between the two situations. So there is one aspect of this that can be made, you know, an argument in that direction that can be made about some of the documents we've seen, about whether or not they are worthwhile being released, at least in the manner of let's say, lack of context, or where people need to add context into them to say to people like, hey, listen, this was just someone who called in to the FBI and made an allegation. There's no additional information to certify the veracity of the claims. So there is that, but we'll get into that because there's, oh boy, is that a dumpster fire? Now I'm going to try to speed run through this here because there is a lot here, but I have amalgamations of things that are in these documents to try to get a high level view of things that are included. So this is CBS News, and I've tried to make sure I don't duplicate stories between the two articles that have these lists. If I make a mistake, I apologize. New Epstein files include photos, documents with redactions as DOJ releases initial trove of records. So woman testified before 2007 grand jury that she brought several fellow high school girls to Epstein. The files released Saturday include grand jury testimony from April 2007, in which a 21-year-old woman testified she brought several fellow high schoolers to Jeffrey Epstein. The woman testified before a federal grand jury in West Palm Beach, Florida, that she was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein through two acquaintances she met at a beach resort when they were all 16. They made a proposition to me, the woman testified. Redacted asked me if I wanted to make money, and she was working for this guy Epstein in Palm Beach. So I told her I was interested, and she further went into detail about massaging him, that you would have to take off articles of clothing and that there would be touching and fondling involved. She says she took the friends up on her offer, and within a few days, she was at Epstein's home, where she met Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell, who took her to a massage room. Quote, I was naked and he tried fondling me and I wouldn't have it, so after the massage, he gave me another proposition to bring girls to the house, and for every girl I brought, I would make $200. The woman testified, adding she was paid $200 for her massage. Notice, Alex, there are no pyramid scheme charges against Jeffrey Epstein. There is no Ponzi scheme allegations, even though he's doing this sort of referral service here.
MLM of
yes,
whatever.
Yeah, multi-level marketing. Yes. Epstein paid her personally, the woman said, in $100 bills, but would never pay her in front of others. This girl said she never gave Epstein a massage again, but did start bringing girls to him. She said she brought girls from her high school and other girls went up to ask her about it. Quote, they had no problem with it, she testified. She says she took 7 to 10 girls to Epstein's home, including a 23-year-old woman. She testified that she was told that the woman was too old and was asked not to bring her back. The woman testified that nearly every other girl she brought to Epstein was 16 to 18 years of age, except one who was 14 years old. The more you did, the more you did is the more you make, she testified. Basically, the more clothes that come off, the more you let him touch you. The more you just let him have his way with you is the more that you would make. Otherwise, you would be demoted down to bringing girls over and just making money that way. The woman said that she would go through Maxwell to set up appointments with the girls, and once an appointment was made, she would drive the girls to his house. She testified that at times she would be the one who would set things up for the massages if Maxwell could not do it. When asked by a grand juror if she and Epstein were still in touch, she responded, I don't talk to any of the females that I once brought over there. I haven't been in contact with Epstein for years. He tried contacting me a few times. I haven't contacted him back. I refused to talk to him. I refused to talk to any of the girls that were involved. However, I did live with one of the girls in Orlando for a couple of months to a year. I haven't spoken with her in over a year either. Grand juries were convened in West Palm Beach in 2005 and 2007 to investigate Epstein, but he reached a deal with the prosecutors to avoid federal charges by pleading guilty in 2008 to state prostitution charges. He served 13 months in county jail and had to register as a sex offender. At least 15 newly released Epstein files have disappeared from the Justice Department's website, records show. At least 15 of the files that were released by the Justice Department Friday in relation to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein were no longer available on the department's website on Saturday, CBS News determined. CBS News downloaded the complete set of documents on Friday and compared it to what was available Saturday. It was unclear why the files were missing. CBS News has reached out to the Justice Department for comment. One of the missing files showed a mass of framed photos on a credenza desk. The photos showed former President Bill Clinton, and another was of the Pope. In an open drawer, there was a photo of President Trump, Epstein, and Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Other missing files included photos of a room with what appeared to be a massage table and nude photos and nude paintings. The episode has deepened concerns that had already emerged from the Justice Department's much anticipated document release. The tens of thousands of pages made public offered little new insight into Epstein's crimes or the prosecutorial decisions that allowed him to avoid serious federal charges for years, while omitting some of the most closely watched materials, including FBI interviews with victims and internal Justice Department memos on charging decisions. Some of the most consequential records expected about Epstein are now to be found in the Justice Department's initial disclosures, which span tens of thousands of pages. Missing are FBI interviews with survivors and internal Justice Department memos examining charging decisions, records that could have helped explain how investigators viewed the case and why Epstein was allowed in 2008 to plead guilty to a relatively minor state-level prostitution charge. The records, required to be released under a recent law passed by Congress, hardly referenced several powerful figures long associated with Epstein, including Britain's former Prince Andrew, renewing questions about who was scrutinized, who was not, and how much disclosures truly advanced public accountability. Among the fresh nuggets, insights into the Justice Department's decision to abandon an investigation at Epstein in the 2000s, which enabled him to plead guilty to that state-level charge, and a previously unseen 1996 complaint accusing Epstein of stealing photographs of children. The releases so far have been heavy on images of Epstein's home in New York City and the U.S. Virgin Islands, with some photos of celebrities and politicians. There was a series of never-before-seen photos of Clinton, but fleetingly few of Mr. Trump. Both have been associated with Epstein, but both have since disavowed those friendships. Neither have been accused of any wrongdoings in connection with Epstein, and there was no indication of the photos played a role in criminal cases brought against him. Despite a Friday deadline set by Congress to make everything public, the Justice Department said it plans to release records on a rolling basis. It blamed the delay on the time-consuming process of obscuring survivors' names and other identifying information. The department has not given any notice when more records might arrive. An FBI special agent testified before a federal grand jury in 2007 describing how a victim was brought into Jeffrey Epstein's home, one Epstein file released Saturday showed. Redacted was the one who brought Redacted to Mr. Epstein's house. Redacted told Redacted that she may have to remove her clothing and that she could make $200 if she performed a massage. So this is more of the similar types of accusations. Epstein accuser Marina Lacerda says the justice system is failing us. Marina Lacerda, an accuser of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, demands that the Justice Department stop redacting names that don't need to be redacted from the Epstein files. Lacerda, who alleges Epstein started sexually abusing her at his New York City mansion when she was 14, told the Associated Press in an interview that the newly released files are not fully transparent. Who are we trying to protect? Are we protecting survivors, or are we protecting the elite men who need to be put out there? And people need to know these people are predators in these files. I feel like, again, the DOJ and the justice system is failing us. Asked by a grand juror in 2007 if Epstein coerced the girls he abused, an FBI agent struggled to answer, citing their pay, a transcript made public Saturday shows. As far as coercion, quote, they were paid $200 to $400 to perform these massages. They were not trained in performing massages. They're not masseuses. But yet, if you ask if they were coerced, they were paid quite a bit of money for 30 to 45 minutes of work, the agent said, adding that some of the girls, being that they were minors going to his residence, got in over their heads and did not always return or come back. Grand jurors in that case asked more than once for the agent to clarify the extent to which Epstein abused minors as opposed to adults. The agent said most of the victims identified by federal and state law enforcement were minors. Quote, in the state investigation, there were over 25 girls identified and more than a majority would have been under the age of 18, the agent said. The case ended with a non-prosecution agreement in which Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges in soliciting and procuring a minor for prostitution. Ghislaine Maxwell was like a cool older sister and made comments like, this is what grown-ups do, a survivor of Epstein's abuse said, according to an FBI agent who testified before a 2019 federal grand jury. The agent described interviews with 3 different women who, as teenagers, were abused by Epstein. The agent said the women described Maxwell being either present or waiting just outside, as Epstein sexually abused them in massage rooms at his residences in Palm Beach, New York, and New Mexico, as well as another location in London. The FBI agent testified that after the first time Epstein abused one 14-year-old girl, Maxwell called her and said, "In sum and in substance, well, aren't you a clever girl?" Jeffrey was very impressed. Said she was flown all over the world with Epstein for years. She described to the agent an incident after she turned 18. She said Maxwell had shown her to a bedroom, and on the bed was a schoolgirl outfit. Maxwell said, "Well, I thought it would be adorable if you gave Jeffrey his tea in this," the agent said. So she felt like she had to put it on, and so she put it on, took Epstein his tea, and Epstein then slapped her on the buttocks and reached under her skirt and touched her. Asked what the woman's demeanor was like recounting during this witness interview, the agent replied, "She was crying. She was very upset." The agent said the schoolgirl outfit was recovered from Epstein's New York mansion by law enforcement in 2019. Handwritten notes show messages for Epstein, including missed call from Trump. Over a dozen handwritten messages left for Epstein were shown in what appeared to be a 2019 grand jury presentation. Several similar messages of Mr. J.E. referenced females being available or asking if they are, while 2 others focused on whether a female can work. Another message appears to be from a girl trying to talk to J.E. about college. Another message seems to be from a female trying to get in touch with Epstein and includes a note, "Please call her." Another message shows the now President Trump called Epstein. The time called recorded 5:18, but the message is not dated. No reason is given for the call. Another message is connected to someone named Darren. The message says, "He has info, please call him." There are 18 messages total featured in the presentation. All callers were redacted except for the ones referencing Trump and Darren. So I'm going to paste these articles to the thread here because there's more things. There's a lot of repetitious sort of stuff because a lot of it's not that the details are all about the same cases, but a lot of the claims are very, very similar. So the money involved, the massages and things like that. Now, we're going to get now to the stuff that exploded exploded the internet here. And these are going to be in the realm of rumor. These are not going to be in the threshold of like pretty certain they happened, they were investigated, and we have lots of reliable witnesses, or it fits a complete pattern that we have that makes it really plausible. We have a lot of reason to say that the claims in here deserve scrutiny. And this is from the Oklahoman. New Epstein documents include a claim of an Oklahoma murder. This is one that gained millions and millions of views and is spread throughout Twitter over the last couple days that you may have come across. The latest release of Jeffrey Epstein documents includes an FBI report about a caller's claim of a suspicious death in Kiefer, Oklahoma in January 2000. The caller said a woman was found with her head blown off in the small town northeast Oklahoma days after reporting to police she had been raped by Epstein and Donald Trump. The caller described the death as murder. The FBI report was in nearly 30,000 new documents released by the U.S. Justice Department on December 23rd. Quote, some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election, the Justice Department stated in a social media post. Quote, to be clear, the claims are unfounded and false, and if they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already, the Justice Department stated. Now, as an aside, I don't believe that is an appropriate comment for the Justice Department to be making on Twitter, although I do also believe that if this was something that the Biden administration were made aware of, they would have, if there was, something that would have made it stick, they would have used it against Donald Trump. I do find that a plausible claim. The FBI got the call about the Oklahoma death at its National Threat Operations Center on October 27th, 2020, according to the 3-page report. Alex, yes?
Yep.
Oh, did you have something you wanted to comment?
No, sorry. That was not.
Oh, okay.
That was not me trying to speak.
The presidential election that year was on November 3rd. The caller said he took Trump to the airport in 1995 while working as a limousine driver in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, according to the report. He said he overheard Trump on a call continuously stating the name Jeffrey and making references to abusing some girl. The caller told the FBI he was, quote, a few seconds from pulling the limousine over on the median and within a few seconds of pulling him out of the car and hurting him due to some of the things he was saying. The caller told the FBI he spoke to a woman in 1999 in the days before Christmas about how he met Trump. He said she told him Trump had raped her along with Epstein. Now that sentence is poorly phrased. I believe the correct inference is that both Trump and Epstein were claimed to have raped the girl, not that Trump raped Epstein, according to the report. He also said the woman He also said the woman told him, some girl with a funny name took me into a fancy hotel or building. That's how it happened. The caller said he urged the woman to call the police. According to the report, he said she replied, I can't, they will kill me. He said the woman told him on Christmas Day that she called the police after all. He said he told her she had done good. He said he learned on January 10th, 2000 from his girlfriend that the woman was dead, according to the report. He said officers on the scene had stated there was no way it was a suicide, but the coroner said it was a suicide. He said his girlfriend later told him the woman committed suicide because she had gotten cocaine from a Mexican drug cartel. The caller said he, quote, feels the murder is a cover-up for Ghislaine Maxwell, longtime Epstein associate, according to the report. Maxwell is serving 20 years in prison after being convicted of conspiring with Epstein to entice girls to traveling for illicit sex. Epstein died by suicide, authorities have concluded, while awaiting trial on similar charges in Manhattan jail in 2019. Trump is mentioned repeatedly in the new documents, including as a passenger on Epstein's private plane for at least 8 flights from 1993 to 1996. The president has not been accused of any wrongdoing in relation to Epstein, who was a wealthy and well-connected financier. The Justice Department blacked out the names of the caller, his girlfriend, and the woman who died. A 19-year-old student from Kiefer died on January 10th, 2000, according to death notices in 2 newspapers, the Tulsa World and the Sapulpa Herald. The state's chief medical examiner, Dr. Eric Pfeiffer, told the Oklahoman on December 24th that the death of Dusty Ray Duke was ruled a suicide by gunshot to the head. Her body was found at an address in Sapulpa, which is near Kiefer, according to medical examiner records. The caller also claimed to know the identity of John Doe number 2 and said the person was connected to Bill and Hillary Clinton. According to the report, John Doe number 2 was the name given to the possible suspect in the truck bomb attack on the Oklahoma City Federal Building in 1995. So this caller, who is making these claims, really has a lot of interesting and important information to give people in November of 2020. Alex, don't you think it's kind of interesting that he's been withholding this information from everyone?
I mean, it appears that
this whole time?
he has information that might lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton. Even.
Yeah, right. The FBI released sketches.
I don't know about you, Gator. Every time I've committed suicide, it's because I got the bad coke from Mexican cartels. I don't know about you.
I don't know. So I attempted to look for news articles similar around this time period, and I couldn't find anything that was describing these suicides. So this is the first time, this is the only report that I have that there was even a death that is sort of similar in nature. Everyone else says that they couldn't find them. So this is the only news story I have that says they found one.
Well, at least they searched the metadata and it wasn't corrupted, so that's something.
So this is a second article on the Kiefer, Oklahoma thing. This is from KJRH. A report released in the Epstein files suggests a connection between a Kiefer death, Donald Trump, and Jeffrey Epstein. However, the report remains unverified. When this round of records was released, the Department of Justice said on X that some of the documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made before the 2020 election. These claims have yet to be proven true or false. The report also contains redactions of names that make it difficult to verify. Chief Johnny O'Mara of Kiefer Police Department told 2 News on December 23rd he first learned of the supposed connection that same morning. Quote, I looked, and there's absolutely no indication of anything related to information that I was able to discern from the DOJ document. It's really confusing, the document is, with the redactions. So basically, I just took the dates and saw if there was anything related, and there's nothing in our records that would indicate something like that happening inside the city limits of Kiefer. The tipster claims that in 1997, he made contact with a woman he'd known for 6 or 7 years and had a son with. He said the woman was having money issues and problems with her daughters. The man said the woman asked how to spell Ghislaine several times and noted she took her daughters up to see one of the supposed fathers who lived in Niagara Falls, New York. A tipster claimed the woman said he met a lady who invited her daughters to a fancy hotel and met Donald Trump and some of his friends in 1997. He also said the woman implied Maxwell gave her money and would give her additional money if needed. Around Christmas Eve of 1999, the tipster was at the woman's house visiting a son they had together. He claimed the woman was acting strange and asked if he needed a ride home. He said the woman asked about his time as a limousine driver in Dallas-Fort Worth, during which he said he met Donald Trump. He claimed some of the things Trump said while he was driving to the airport in 1995 were very concerning. He said he was, quote, a few seconds away from pulling the limousine over the median and pulling him out of the car and hurting him due to the things he was saying. He's claimed Trump continuously stated the name Jeffrey while on the phone and made references to abusing some girl. So this article, gives the same facts, but this one kind of says that there isn't a woman that supposedly died under those circumstances. So there's conflicting information about whether a woman truly exists that fits this profile. Now, of course, given that it was 1999, I believe, or supposedly, and this report wasn't made until 2020, it is, even if true that the woman exists, it is always possible to just take an event that happened contemporaneously and say that it's related, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with it, right? You can just go look in the past and go, I'm going to say that this person is related to the story because you have that ability. So, if you're going to bring up the Oklahoma City bombing in the same sort of report, it's a little questionable in what you're doing anyway.
Gator, but I ask you, put yourself in this man's shoes.
Yes.
You come across information about Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the Clintons.
Right. Yes.
What do you do?
I wait until the second time
you just found out.
I wait until the second time Donald Trump is about to be elected president after Jeffrey Epstein has already allegedly committed suicide while in jail.
Well, look,
that's what I do.
First time you didn't think he would win, and then you spent 4 years blaming yourself for not speaking up, and then you were like, "Well, now I have to tell them."
Now, this is the second story that gained traction. And Alex, we're going to go through a fun little tour of lefty conspiracy Twitter.
I love that place.
It's not just Twitter; it's all social media. Okay, so I'm incorrect.
It's called Blue Sky, but yes.
So this is a story that has been making the rounds. Is somehow more sensational than the woman blowing off her head story. And this involves a supposed rape of a young girl and also an infanticide. So I'm going to read the actual thing that came through the tip line. Okay. And this is the raw tip line information that caused the sensationalist story to circulate from the files. And so this is the submitted text. This was submitted on August 3rd, 2020. I previously provided a tip about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, under an alias I have for myself. All the other details of the previous tip match all the information given in today's tip, except I am giving my real name, which is not provided to us. A detective from NYPD FBI sex trafficking task force called me a couple of weeks ago from a 212 area code number. I talked to him for about 20 or 30 minutes about my being sex trafficked by my uncle and Jeffrey Epstein in 1984 while I was 13 and pregnant. I told him some other important information about other high-profile individuals involved in my sex trafficking and the murder and disposal of my newborn daughter because of the ordeal. I gave birth to her while in the middle of this sex trafficking, cannot remember the detective's name, nor do I have a number where I can contact him. I would like to have his name and contact information, and I would also like to know if there will be any further follow-up. So this, just so you're aware, this is a form that she filled out. So that's why there's some awkwardness in the way that these are phrased. So, you're given a space to put the question. Yeah, well, I'm saying that there is a reason that it seems like she's making requests in here, like it's a form, and you're putting what you can where you can. So the violation was filled out as other violation. The field was questioned. What was the exact crime that occurred? She filled out child sex trafficking and infanticide. When did this crime incident occur? May through September 1984. Where did the crime incident occur? Mostly from a yacht in Lake Michigan, originating from Mona Lake, Michigan. Subject information: first name Jeffrey, last name Epstein. Additional information: I am just wanting to reconnect with the original detective that called me, and I offered information about this. How is contact known? He was orchestrating a deal along with my uncle where different men and a few women and girls would come to a variety of boats and yachts and pay money to force me to do with them when I was 13 and pregnant. Witness information: first name Donald, last name Trump. Additional information: again, I'm just trying to find out the name of the NYPD detective on the FBI sex trafficking task force that called me a couple weeks ago and spoke to me about some of these issues. How is contact known? He participated regularly in paying money to force me to with him, and he was present when my uncle murdered my newborn child and disposed of the body in Lake Michigan. So that's this tip line piece that was released with the Trove. Okay, Alex. Now,
the first one I find more, gruesome for one, but
sure,
not really what I was going for. I find more plausible because, again, this person's this is a form that is filled not for the public or for any attempt to get anybody in trouble. Whoever this is appears to be very consistent about what she wants, which she repeats at every given opportunity. So, I don't know if it happened or not. Maybe she made it up in her head or whatever. But it's really interesting that sometimes somebody will call you up and claim that they are from wherever, trying to figure out what you know, right? Especially if you've let loose somewhere that you were involved in some kind of case that maybe somebody they're affiliated with may have an interest in. So now, it could be a situation where there was no such detective.
It could have been no such detective. It could have been among the things of possibility. Okay, this was that there were plenty of people in the government that were working in opposition to Donald Trump. Okay.
Yep.
And so there could have been people, let's say, following leads, right, but following rumor and making contacts to people sort of as an adversarial, not truly investigative capacity, but more of an adversarial strategic capacity. And therefore, this person that she's trying to reach maybe exists, but doesn't exist as an official capacity of the FBI or detective working as, under official capacity, and was really doing so just for political purposes.
Right. That's fair. I guess what you're saying is they may be operating on the side of the wrongdoer, or they may be operating on the side of whoever is trying to get the wrongdoer in trouble.
Right.
Or the accused, to be precise.
So now there's a class of infotainment that circulates on some of the short form video platforms. So Instagram/Facebook, which they share content, TikTok. And it is the leftist progressive sort of types who do explainers to their audience. They try to inform them by giving them a presentation of sort of a Socratic conversation where they try to lead their audience to specific conclusions, and they're supposed to be thorough and informative, right? They are supposed to actually approach, or their presentation is that they're supposed to approach this from a high-minded, serious format where they try to exhaust avenues of thought. And I want
the people that make Hawks sound thorough and investigative.
Let's play this clip, and I this is split into two here.
The president was an accomplice to murder? I want to be really careful with this one. And also make sure that people know this is not for the faint of heart. So, trigger warning. There have been a number of accusations and quite horrific mentions of the president in the most recent batch of the Epstein files that the DOJ was forced to release. Right. And they've only released a small batch so far, but one of the documents that was just released was a complaint that was filed with law enforcement by a Jane Doe in 2020. She names Epstein and the current president and claims that they repeatedly paid her for intercourse in the 80s. When she was 13. And she says that at least on one of the occasions where he was present, she was pregnant and gave birth. And this is fucking upsetting. She says that her uncle killed and disposed of her newborn daughter in Lake Michigan. Is this all true? We know that the complaint is real, but we don't know if the events actually happened.
Now, Alex, if it stopped there, if the video stopped there, I would say that would actually be a reasonable way to end it and summarize the story. Would you agree?
Sorry, the moment this person started, it became very, very clear that it has been spending an inordinate amount of time listening to this woman you're going to help me remember the name of, who was the chief sort of MSNBC RollerGator / all sorts, short hair, thick black rims. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, short hair, black rims.
Oh, come on, the big one. At MSNBC.
It's not Jen Psaki who is on MSNBC.
No, come on, man! Like she's like the main host.
There are so many the main ones.
No. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I'm gonna look it up. Keep going.
Okay.
This is
all right. Well,
annoying.
So he doesn't stop there, and let me ask you exactly how long it takes before he completely
Rachel
goes.
Maddow. Right.
Okay.
Well, this guy has clearly listened to an inordinate amount of Rachel Maddow, and is sort of inhabiting her persona.
I see.
Like, can't you play just the first few seconds again and tell me if you can hear it?
The president was an accomplice to murder? I want to be really careful with this one. And also make sure that people know this is not for the faint of heart. So
I can see the cadence. Yeah, I can hear the cadence that you're talking about.
Murder? And then the kind of halting sort of delivery. And
if he would have stopped the video at we know the report is real, we don't know if the claims are, that would summarize everything we know about this right now. But he does not stop there.
The DOJ has come out and warned that some allegations, like forced intercourse, are unsubstantiated, but they haven't outright denied it, like they did some things, like a letter between Epstein and Larry Nassar. Nassar was the gymnastics coach that went to prison for similar crimes? Correct. The letter lays out some exploitations of the president, but the letter was actually sent after Epstein's death, and forensics say that the handwriting doesn't match. How would they even prove that the Jane Doe phone call about the stuff with the baby, that actually even happened? It's really difficult because it's been 40 years, but they would need to get records that prove the president was there at the time, supporting testimonies from people that were present, or get birth records for a baby that then disappeared. It's the 80s, not a lot of technology for tracking. The people that were there probably don't want to talk about it, and kids that are giving birth on a boat probably don't have great medical records or getting birth certificates. Exactly. SA can be difficult to prove, especially when it was that long ago. And that's why it's estimated that at least half, if not 2/3 of those kinds of crimes just go unreported because we don't listen to women. Yeah. So how do we know if it's true? Well, I think generally we should just listen to women. But also another key criteria that law enforcement take into account is pattern of behavior. Well, I guess he's never actually been convicted of anything, right? No. But he has been recorded bragging about walking in on young women changing, grabbing women by the genitals, saying things like, I moved on her like a bitch. He's been in countless photos with Jeffrey Epstein being quite friendly, and he's intervened in investigations into people like Andrew Tate, who's being investigated by the US government after being charged with trafficking in other countries. Oh, right.
Alex, you tell me. Is there any sort of issues with the reasoning that this person is using?
No, this is the same sort of, like, we got to find a name for this kind of journalism where it's like the train of bad, like you just attach everything. And he was known to say that Nazis are good people, and he also likes golden elevators. And
well, it starts off right from the beginning of that second clip where it's like, well, it would be really hard to prove that it happened, which presumes that it happened, and it's not the difficulty of ascertaining the truth about an event and whether or not an event occurred or not. It is just proving that the event occurred, right? So you're already putting the cart before the horse and assuming that the hurdle is just to prove that it happened. And and even in there, he goes, and while people who were there are unlikely to want to talk about it, that assumes that there is a there to have been there for.
Yes. And the fact of their silence actually is evidence in favor of this happening. And,
and then it boils down to even like, and we don't even know.
Most likely have happened.
We don't even know that the person who typed this into a computer was a female. We don't know that, right? I mean, we assume.
Okay, they claim to be a female, but we don't.
They claim to be a female, right? But my point is, we don't know for sure that the person who typed this in was a woman. We don't know who this was. We have no reason to actually believe that there's corroborating evidence that these events even occurred yet. Yet we jump to the idea that the hurdle is that 2/3 of sexual assaults go unreported, thus making them true.
I want to understand how that statistic is made. I'm sorry to say this, but how do you know the unreported sexual assaults? Because
were you ever sexually assaulted?
When I see.
You do a survey.
When I look, I know what I'm
Were you ever
find,
sexually assaulted?
I mean, sometimes my wife is like really into it, no. I don't know what to tell you. It's one of those where somebody does a survey and they said, have you ever been touched in a way that you didn't desire or whatever?
I have been touched in ways I didn't desire. There you go. I mean, listen, I would answer that to the affirmative. Yes, I've been sexually assaulted in my life. Now, do I would I put the person in prison for it? No, they were drunk. They had whatever.
So the thing is that you then take that and say, well, these are unreported sexual assaults, which we just take for a fact because somebody said what you said, right? Mm-hmm. So there you go, 2/3 done. Like it's like the 40% of women are raped in their lives or whatever, which is like not exactly true, or even inexactly true.
So now that, Alex, was the best of them.
Oh, no.
Now, each of these, mind you, on Facebook alone, total over 1 million views if you sum these ones I'm playing up. Okay, we're talking hundreds of thousands of views. These are getting widely shared.
The DOJ just dropped the latest chunk of Epstein files, and this is going to be a little darker than usual. There are some allegations concerning Donald Trump. You know how we always say that coming from the right, every accusation is a confession? And then every once in a while, we realize that we held back on recognizing something as a legitimate accusation and therefore a confession because we just assumed it was too wild, too crazy to really believe. Well, in the latest released files, there are multiple communications from a victim alleging to have been trafficked in 1984 at the age of 13 by her uncle and Epstein, and that Donald Trump was among the men that paid for her. And I'm sorry, I don't want to soften this language, but I feel it's more important that this get out, because that's not all. She also claims that she was pregnant at this time and that Donald Trump was present when her uncle disposed of her newborn in Lake Michigan, which it's hard to know what to do with that information. It sounds like a right-wing conspiracy theory. In fact, it sounds like something that Trump has been accusing Democrats of doing for years, something he calls post-birth abortions, which, as we all know, are not a real thing, because post-birth, that is not an abortion, obviously. And yet, who comes up with something like that? It feels very weird to be on this side of the question of credulity of an accusation of that nature. And to be clear, this is something that has happened to trafficking victims before. We're just not used to knowing the people allegedly involved. There are a couple of reasons why the DOJ may have released this, considering we already know that they have scrubbed Donald Trump's name from these files as much as possible. They literally removed files that contained photos of him or inclusions of his name that they meant to redact and missed. Number one, it was done purposely. They felt that this accusation was either too hard to believe or easier to disprove, easier to cast doubt on than others, hence its inclusion. Or it was, as their previous inclusions of his name, an accident. If you look at this document, his name is actually included in this form entry. So first name Donald, last name Trump for a witness. And then in the paragraph describing this witness, the victim describes how Trump witnessed the alleged infanticide. They also describe how Donald Trump partook in their trafficking. It's possible they just missed it. I genuinely don't know what to do with this, but.
So Alex, what do you think? What do you do with this? What she calls information?
It's possible that they missed it, but I'm going to assume the government is competent.
Okay.
For no reason. I don't know, man. I really don't know what to tell you. This whole situation is fucked. These people have no standards. They don't care. They, will
for context,
tell you about
this is a very popular infotainment woman who explains the world to people. She has a lot of high-ranking, high-viewed videos where she tells people about fascism and how to combat the government and the Trump administration. Like, she has a very wide audience. So she has a very
the key thing to remember is that this person probably also tells you that you shouldn't believe conspiracy theories. Right.
Not the right wing ones, that's for sure.
Right. It's and every accusation is a confession. So what is she accusing Trump of again? Yeah, I mean that's where we are now.
So here's another one to round this out here.
While everyone was distracted with the whole Nicki Minaj interview, everyone is missing this document from the Epstein files that was just released that outlines that Donald Trump witnessed a newborn baby of a 13-year-old girl that he would partake in and witnessed it being murdered. So in this document that you can find on the justice.gov website on the recent batch 8, if you go to page 90 and go to this file 25010, you get this file. And on the first page of this email that was sent in 2020, this woman alleges that in 1984, when she was 13 years old, she was being trafficked by her uncle and Epstein when she was 13 years old and pregnant. And if you go to the third page of this document, it lists Donald Trump. They forgot to redact his name. And then it states he participated regularly in paying money to force me to redact it with him. And he, Donald Trump, was present when my uncle deleted my newborn child and disposed of the body in Lake Michigan. Again, the document file ending in 25010 alleges that Donald Trump regularly had relations with a 13-year-old girl who was pregnant, alleges that Donald Trump was there when her uncle deleted her newborn daughter from this earth, and that Donald Trump was also there when the body was disposed of. And
so anyway, Alex, that is now official canon. Just so you know, I think that story has spread far and wide enough that officially happened now.
You think Trump can request that these allegations are deleted in the European Union? And I didn't get deleted.
That is a perfect tie-in there, sir. I congratulate you on bringing that back around full circle, because yes, this is it's actually, if you see that the parts where they allege that they've done redactions on Trump's name, there is nothing as sensationalistic as this. So if you imagine that they were going through and deliberately redacting Trump from everything they possibly could, these would be the two stories that it would be the worst to accidentally miss. Right?
The question, Gator, though, is this: why are they making so much effort to obscure this information? This is the problem, right? Yes, of course, like maybe it's not Trump or whatever. I don't know. Maybe they've been scrubbing, maybe they've not been scrubbing. Maybe these things have been inserted in there to, tag everybody as a crazy person. I don't know. The thing is, why is the government going to this trouble? There must be a motive here. Even if they're not competent,
let's narrow down. Let's narrow down the statements, okay? Because there's going to be some. They're not all going to be equal, okay? So narrow down what you're asking about. What is the that you were referring to when it comes to this? Because I can give you a very reasonable explanation why this tip that came through the tip box was never released.
No, I have no interest. Frankly, I have no interest in this tip. What I'm saying is, the entire theater around these files that the government is engaging in, like, what is the objective of it? Why are they going so far as to ignore laws now of the land that have been passed and signed by the president, and are not sort of upholding what they, law is?
Which law are you referring to that they're ignoring?
The Transparency Act.
Which aspect of it?
Well, the Transparency Act said everything has to be released by said date, and
it also has specific requirements about redactions. So if you have two competing, yes, but the quantity of documents does require some time-based.
Redacting is not does not comport with the requirements of the law.
But you would agree that the time in which the law was passed and the time that they had to begin on these documents to prepare them for release, they have two possibly competing things to uphold. One would be the time requirement to release them, and then the other would be the thing that requires time to do. Both of those violate the law if one of them is not upheld. If you don't meet the time requirement to release them, you're in violation of the time to release them law. And if you fail to do the proper redactions, you're in violation of the redaction requirements.
No, the requirements are allowances, they're not requirements. So they're like, you can for this purpose. It doesn't say you must. So that's not precise. But let's say that there's other laws that obligate them, whatever. They've leaked names of victims left and right. There's no problem, right? They don't seem to have an issue with that. The problem appears to be that the 10 co-conspirators that were identified in a different case that we don't know the names of, things like that.
Okay.
But you don't notice that, like, you don't think that there's like like a very weird pattern of behavior around these files by the government?
This current batch, the weirdness, I have no specific reason to attribute other than to the quantity and volume of information that is being released, and the difficulty.
Sort of through the hat in terms of the amount of documents. So, well, we couldn't do everything, but we will release what we have completed.
Yeah, and we have documents that were improperly redacted, right? So we have mistakes of a large quantity already being made.
We do, but there are explicit decisions to redact things that were not supposed to be redacted.
Okay.
Like there's entire documents coming out, like all blacked out, top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, everything to do with a specific court case.
So there's going to be several things that I would want to know.
They do believe that everything should be released. The DOJ releases everything blacked out.
On a case-by-case basis, I would have to see specific things because there's going to be several things that come to mind. Now, one, I don't want to pretend that there is nothing to see or that I don't think that anyone is protecting something. That's not where I'm going with this, but there are plenty of reasonable explanations for individual instances that can occur. So
that's why I'm trying to zoom out, because for any particular thing you can come up with something. The question really is the aggregate here, which is that for somebody who was supposed to be just a garden variety criminal, supposedly not.
So if we zoom out and we go to the normal circumstance, can you give me another case where in a normal circumstance we get this amount of transparency, just even evaluated at the clusterfuck that it currently is this week?
I don't understand. Yes. There are a lot of cases where a lot of files have been released on.
For an average normal situation?
Like, what do you mean average normal situation?
Look, if this were just a regular person federally indicted for a crime, okay, charged, found guilty, whatever, even if there was some question about whether or not he wound up killing himself, right? But he was not one of the most notorious names in the country, didn't spawn memes, endless memes, and didn't implicate president. Just some random person who has been charged by the federal government in a crime.
Yep.
Do we have any instances of that where this type of demand for transparency or expectation of transparency is the norm?
I don't know. I mean, do you think the O.J. Simpson case, there hasn't been like a lot of release, or Oklahoma City? I don't know, like just whatever. Yeah, I'm sure. Like any case where there is a murder, where or something heinous crime related that creates a community of people that are investigating it, that can FOIA stuff. The Wuhan thing or whatever. Okay, you can say that there's definitely like intelligence.
I would propose this to you. I would propose that you would not find this to be an anomaly when it comes to lack of transparency. I would expect you to find this to be the norm, and that even in the most ancillary of cases, the government is going to be unlikely to give you transparency because it is always going to be their benefit to make sure that they have control over the information flow at all times, regardless of whether an individual instance of releasing it seems innocuous. They do not want to create. They do not want to create the expectation that anyone can get anything.
Wait. No. This is a situation where this is very different, because this is a situation where there's a law being passed. Okay, mm-hmm. a law being passed supersedes all other laws that have been passed before. This is just how it works. Right. Okay, newer laws overpower older laws.
Only where they directly actually overrule the previous laws if they are in contradiction to other laws that they have to be adjudicated.
No.
Yes. Yes. It is not a temporal thing. It is not a temporal thing. They have to actually overrule the previous law. If there are two laws that are in contradiction, meaning that the items that they encroach have two mutually distinct jurisdictional frameworks, that it is not just because a law was newer that it overrides it.
Okay, but in the same framework, say federal, I don't know, framework, this is a newer law. Like this is, if they can't say like, oh, but I don't know, some sort of a victim transparency law says that, we have to obscure this, and this new law says that we have to release it. What do we do? Like,
if the new law does not address the fact that there is an existing law on the books that creates a contradiction, yes, it still does become a problem. The new law, the new law does not just get to say unless like if the law is, Alex, that you're not permitted to cross the street without the walk signal turned on.
They didn't put a word, like a standard suffix in there that says like
that's not what I'm saying.
What is should be done. Notwithstanding
you have to let me. You have to let me. Let me finish here.
All right, go for it.
If there's a law that says that you're only allowed to walk across the crosswalk when the signal is on, but then another law says that you must do something that would require you to violate that other law, but never mentions that other law that you're supposed to violate, like says you must go help a person, like one of those the term is escaping me right now, but the types of laws that say that if you don't rush to someone to aid in their, to help them out when they're in danger in public or something like that, that you are committing a crime. There's certain laws like that in certain places that make it a crime to do that. It's the ending of Seinfeld. They get arrested for that, failing to help someone who is being mugged. But if the law itself that you're passing doesn't mention the contradiction, it doesn't automatically override it. It creates a legal ambiguity about the correct behavior. It is not strictly a temporal order that laws get passed. They have to specifically mention the fact that they are overriding something.
Okay, as I said, you are assuming that they didn't put a standard suffix in there that says like notwithstanding anything else.
I'm not assuming that. I am just simply stating that it is not specifically temporal.
Let me jump right over this because we have, I believe, 3 cases with grand juries where the judges in the cases ruled that this law means that like the records from those cases have to be released, and what the DOJ did is take those records and release everything blacked out properly, apparently. So you're like, okay, so the judge, presumably they know laws and stuff, and if there was some sort of contradiction, they would have highlighted it. But no, they said like, yep, okay. Before I had said that we can't release it, but this is a new law, so in light of this law, we gotta put it out. And the DOJ is like, yep, here's a bunch of black pages. Like, I don't know, man. Like, you can't convince me that this is like just part of normal procedure.
I have no desire to try to convince you of that. I am only giving you my thoughts as presented to me. So if you have that situation that you just sort of gave the allusion to, if you have that for me and I can look at it and I can see if it's the situation I'm talking about or not, I will be more than happy to side with you or tell you where I think you've made a mistake. So,
and I'm not even being facetious. I know that if I lay it out for you, you will see it. But anyway, I don't know. To me, that's really the hang up here. Remember, last time we spoke about it, right? I said, well, I could sort of see maybe he's like a lone pervert who kind of has set up a system for himself and whatever, right? But I just can't make that fit with his connections with prime ministers and other people in high offices and, all the rich and famous. Like, I can't make, the various odd things about him stand independently, right? That I conclude that there must be some connection between his, his appetites and his, scientific quests and his international man of mystery / diplomacy / technology investor.
There's an interesting thing that you'd want to sort of inspect. Not necessarily that it will give you an answer, but it requires an explanation just the same. And that is post his one conviction, right, where it sort of became required for everyone to admit that he had these untoward proclivities and was this sort of sexual deviant. There is a set of these people who distanced themselves from him, and then a set of them who maintained contact. Okay? Yep. Under the umbrella of the idea that he had blackmail on him and things like that, what would distinguish the two groups, the people who distanced themselves from those who didn't distance themselves, under the idea that he had compromise on at least some people?
I don't know.
And it could all be that everyone that maintained closeness to him and didn't distance themselves were the ones that he had compromise on. It could be that type of explanation. But knowing and having an explanation in the story seems important. Well, that case. Trump has supposedly distanced himself since 1996, right?
Not because of that case. Not because.
No, I know. But Trump supposedly distanced himself from since 1996, right?
I think that's a bit late. I mean, he wrote that thing in his birthday book. That wasn't in 96.
Well, that's what the it supposedly is. Now, maybe the time's different, but maybe I'm getting the timeline wrong. Maybe it was 2006 and I'm misremembering. But that was my understanding.
There's a bunch of them on TikTok.
But my point is, so we know that what's his face who just got disinvited from all of his prestigious economic communities, Larry Summers, he kept in contact. So he is a person who's on the side of keeping in contact. Yes. I believe Bill Gates is someone who kept in contact. So he is on the side of keeping in contact. Now, if there is absolutely zero people other than supposedly Donald Trump who distance themselves, then perhaps it leans towards he had compromise on everybody. But if there is a class of people who distance themselves, who are all just as famous, and a class of people who kept in contact, knowing what sort of decision-making criteria would make someone distance versus keep in contact would help provide a more thorough story to whether or not the compromise idea is as widespread. Right? Either he would have compromise on everyone he came in contact with because he was encouraging all of them to participate and get them to, do something that he would have over them, or he wasn't able to do it to everyone, but he still was able to maintain contact despite having sort of a secret reputation, something where everyone knew, but nobody really said it out loud. Because he clearly people had ideas.
Look, my sense is that whatever blackmail was going on was not of the nature of I've got you on video and I'm going to release it.
Okay.
All right. My sense is that whatever blackmail was going on was of the nature of make sure I don't get caught because we're all going down together. It's self-protection type blackmail rather than
are they all sexual crimes in nature, or are they possibly just all sorts of financial crimes?
I'm sure he was banking all sorts of shit.
Okay, all right, okay,
Look,
okay.
The thing is, I had a interesting conversation with an LLM the other day, where I was, so people like Bill Gates kept saying, I'm talking to him because he can offer tax advice, right? And this keeps coming up, and people are like, Bill fucking Gates, are you fucking kidding me now? You don't have anybody else to talk to for your taxes? Like what? Like TurboTax was busy that day or whatever. And on the one case, I sort of see it. On the other hand, what if somebody with access to nation states, right, can provide some unique privileges to people in exchange for perhaps being able to ask for favors later?
Yes. Of course.
Right? That will give you a ridiculous saving. In fact, what the LLM told me, and I need to confirm this because I don't know why people aren't looking in that direction. Apparently, his holdings in the BVIs had that special granted sort of status where
is the BVIs British Virgin Islands?
Sorry, USVI, the United U.S. Virgin Islands, the little St. John type area. Right, he had been given special privileges by the governor or whatever where his companies indeed did have an extremely low rate for the money that he was managing. Now, money he was managing could include money he was managing for others, right? So you start to paint a picture here of how he could be doing favors of, the nature of sort of, paying extremely low taxes for connected individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And how that information, they wouldn't want to get out. But at the same time, if he had a proclivity for little girls, well, that's not their problem.
My sense, okay, is not that there was exactly 0 people that committed sexual crimes along with them, but my sense is, broadly speaking, he more got people to not pay attention to that and look the other way, and that illicit things that he was doing with others would probably be more likely to remain on the financial and international finance side of criminality.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm unsure. I think somehow that was part of the story. I mean, again, look at the birthday book. I don't know why you would challenge that it's real. I think like everybody seems to be definitely. Sorry, I'm just saying, like the stuff that's been released from his the supposed birthday book.
Yeah. Okay.
Where everybody is talking about this. I mean, in not so many words perhaps, but they're all alluding to his weird attitudes about, young girls. Mm-hmm. It keeps coming back over and over. Like, this is not a man who's trying to get people to ignore it. Like, even Eric,
I mean, look the other way, criminally speaking. Criminally speaking,
bouncing some girl on his lap while he was talking to him.
I mean, look the other way, criminally speaking.
I mean, yeah, they're not going to turn him in if that's
right.
Anything, but
right,
sure, he's not. I'm unsure whether they would have anything to turn him in about. But that he was a creep, I think is very clear that everybody sort of knew, and he wasn't much hiding it.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know. That to me is a thing that's requiring of understanding why this is being paid attention to at the highest levels of government. Why people like Bongino and Patel, who spent their careers sort of talking about, don't let go of this case, like Bongino said, and then they go in and they're like, yeah, I read the file, there's nothing. You read the file? The file supposedly has 1 million pages in it, Dan. Like, how good of you don't look like a good reader to me, but let's just say.
Have you ever seen the movie Short Circuit?
No. Yes.
Okay.
Of course
all right. Well, Johnny Five could flip through and read a book.
That's
an
right,
entire.
That's right. Now we're alleging Dan Bongino as Johnny Five.
You don't know.
Oh my god!
All right.
And we're not talking about the Marilyn Manson guitarist. I'm
gonna open up this for any comments because we're going long, but I do want to get anyone who is still in the audience right now live an opportunity to make comments on anything we've discussed today as we close this out. Because Alex, would you believe that, hypothetically speaking, I have more material to discuss that could probably keep us going for another 3 hours that isn't Epstein related?
I mean, we haven't even touched the clinical trials and the p-values.
Right.
With Brett.
Exactly. And there's even more than that, man. Like, the amount of stuff that keeps piling up is unbelievable. The dumb
sorry,
keeps.
I will chastise my wife for booking.
Exploding. No, it was perfectly okay. I don't even think that would have solved it. It's just the dumb is exponential.
This is a problem that just has no solution.
Yes, exactly. So if anyone wants to request to speak, I'm going to give you a few moments as we wrap up the conversation here. Look, Alex, I don't pretend that there's nothing going on, and I don't pretend all of these things are innocent mistakes. I'm just saying that I think there's too many questions that people fill in the gaps with obvious chicanery when probably a large amount of them is incompetence, and I'm not doing the Hanlon's razor thing where it's better to ascribe incompetence. I don't play that game. I just look at the field and I see far more room for let's say, innocent reasons, and I don't mean innocent in like it's all good, where, you know, the government is going to be less forthcoming in the average situation, is not going to reveal the things that it has as a full sort of transparency behavior in general. So the lack of transparency in any given situation is the norm, not the exception. And there are plenty of things about the Epstein situation that are novel and are requiring of explanation, but the lack of the government being happy to be transparent is not specifically itself one of them. You know, a great thing that would need perfect explanation, that would probably just require, you know, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel to admit that prior to getting into the government, they were talking out of their ass and abusing the intelligence of their audience when they were making these claims, because they didn't know things and they were pretending to know things and they were speaking with more certainty than they should have. And that when they got in there, they realized that they didn't have the smoking guns that they had promised everyone that they had been hyping up. And so therefore, they really couldn't.
Here's the thing. If I am Dan Bongino, right, and I'm landed in the situation you described, what I do is I say, here's what I said, here's what happened, here's what I found, here's what convinced me.
That's it. That's if you're Alexandros Marinos playing the role that Dan Bongino has. That's not if you're Dan Bongino, because Dan Bongino would not do such a thing because he didn't do such a thing.
Well,
see, like this is the same situation where you tell me if yes, Gator, if you were president, we know you wouldn't do these things, and that's the same sort of situation. Like, yes, Alex, if you were in his place,
or he couldn't because that line of reasoning does not exist. He didn't see something that could have changed his mind. He just was told in no uncertain terms that this is to be buried and deal with it.
Well, rumor has it Dan Bongino is leaving the government at the end of the year. I don't know if you've seen.
It's not a rumor. I think it's been announced. The thing is that he went out and you know put his name on these statements. So who gives a shit?
Well, right. So now, how will you respond if when he leaves the government, he starts to tell you things that he now doesn't have evidence to back up, but they go back to the previous version of sensationalism that he had before going into government?
So here's the thing. I will apply the Mike Benz rule. And my Mike Benz rule is, has he actually given us anything that we did not know? Or is he just surfing the web and pointing things out for you and saying, like, look at this person. He's over there and he was there before. Look at me talking to you about all these things. And like, I don't care about that. Like, the question is, what are you breaking here? What
like if Dan Bongino comes out and he says, you know, I can't reveal the things that I saw, but boy, did I see them. If he comes out and starts doing that,
well, that is true.
Are you going?
That is a true statement.
It is a true statement, but does it have the weight of sort of? He definitely saw the specific things that I would be looking for. That fill in the gaps.
Going to say that he lied when he said that it was just him and he trafficked nobody but just himself, and that, you know, those things, or not?
That would be interesting. That would be interesting. Do you expect that?
No, I don't.
Okay. So if he maintains the same, there is no there on the way out, and doesn't return back to the bombastic.
There are positions he can take that can try to, you know, thread the needle. Like, well, I didn't see that, but you know, there was all these other things I saw or whatever, right? Which explains why, blah 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 blah. And I wasn't in a position to talk about it now. But I am now. That's why I left, actually, to tell you all about these things that I can tell you about or whatever. Okay?
In my upcoming book.
Yes, you could try to dance around such a position. But at the end of the day, the question is, he came out and made some statements that did appear like hostage statements. I'm not a big sort of body language guy, but come on, like it was a very different tone of voice and like way of being when he was saying those things.
That would be a really nice segment. Shitty body analysis.
That's right.
Where we just get amateurs to start talking about their
Oh my god, we can totally
what he must be doing by his body language.
Yeah. I mean, we can totally like take a.
He scratched his nose. We know what it means when he scratches his nose.
Oh, she looked up left. Up left is a typical invocation to Odin. Sure, we could do that. But like on some level, we all also have a basic understanding of the basic patterns of people talking. Anyway, long story short, I don't think he will invalidate the things that he has put out there with his own name. And as a result, I don't think he will be able to reclaim his status in the podcasting space. It is remarkable to me that you don't, that people do this. They, by all accounts, he took a massive hit, and I think the hit will stick. So one might ask like why he would do that to himself. He could just stay on the outside and be like, yeah, I don't know what's happening, guys, like whatever. Like he went in there, he stayed for a year and then he bails. Okay, it's interesting.
And he didn't even get to name anything after himself, which sucks.
Yeah, like the Epstein-Barr virus.
Well, do you have any?
I watched this video by this YouTuber. She was talking about the Epstein-Barr flare-ups, about how Bill Barr and his father are all connected to Epstein, and
oh Jesus,
it was incredible, very good work.
Do you have any closing thoughts on the day here to lead us out with?
No, I remain, honestly, everything else that we're talking about is like interesting and intriguing and confusing and fascinating in its own way, but I remain extremely concerned about this entirely new sort of battleground of sanctioning people for legal acts just because you feel like it, as a matter of foreign policy, by a transnational body. This is friggin' insane, and the U.S. is doing it too, by the way, to UN members on the Palestine issue. But apparently the EU here is protecting quote unquote their democracy by just friggin' saying nope, you can't say that or else. It is dark, and I don't know. I feel like like you said, we will continue to follow this story and to try to understand more dimensions of this new hellscape that is unraveling before us, and in a real way. I mean, you can always say that this has been the case for a long time or whatever, but this is definitely a point where you could put the a point on and say, like, that's when I knew we were all in a sort of information war where the lines of a state, an actor, a soldier, a person, a human, an influencer are all blurred, and we are now like full unrestricted combat. If you told me tomorrow that the EU is putting out goons on the street who are just randomly murdering people, I would only have like limited doubt. I would have some doubt, but it would not be, it would not be impossible to convince me that this is happening.
Oh, aren't you just the optimist heading into a brand new year?
Oh, is it going to happen, Gator?
This is the last episode before the new year, and there's not going to be like a major overhaul on here, but I am going to try to make a commitment to myself here coming into show prep going in the next year. There is always stuff I leave on the cutting room floor, and sometimes there are topics that I leave on the cutting room floor week after week, and this European Union speech thing has been one of them. And then one of my organizational things that has sort of made it a little difficult for me doing this week after week is I prep the show each week as its own entity. And so the stuff,
by the way, that you do all the hard work. I'm just here pretending that I've never heard about these stories, and I'm really good at it, mostly because I've never heard about these stories. But you do all of the work.
I start about Wednesday, and I put in a couple hours every day until the weekend, in which case I throw in a lot more effort cutting things and stitching them together.
By the way, Gator, is this the first year that we've been doing the show like for the full year?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
We started basically right after Election Day.
I see. Well, I do want to thank you. This is very enjoyable for me, and as stated, you do all the hard work. And I really I've enjoyed this throughout this year. And I feel like it brings something to me personally, being here and being accountable for my wild theories sometimes, and, putting some predictions down and following through on things over time. So thank you. And hopefully we'll do it for another year.
Well, thank you. I want to keep going too. This is also rewarding for me. But as far as the changes go, what happens is I wind up with a lot of stuff every week on the cutting room floor, and some topics continuously get pushed, even though they are things that I want to talk about, or I find important to talk about, like this EU encroachment on speech and the threat that it has to the way that we communicate globally, and. Because I prep things week after week, the stuff that I left on the cutting room floor winds up being in folders that are for previous weeks, and I don't necessarily keep track in my head of how many weeks ago that was on the list. So I'm going to start organizing in this upcoming year a little bit better, where when something falls on the cutting room floor, I move it to sort of a global organization of topics and stories that have been cut.
Look, if I was the type that could promise to write some software to do something and would follow through, which I most certainly am not, I would say that, we should make some kind of a platform where people can vote on, topics that they, if we have like 20 things on the docket, people can like highlight something that maybe we don't think is doesn't end up getting discussed, that maybe they want to see it. I'm not saying that everybody should be able to submit their stories or whatever, but I'm saying out of the things that we have identified, maybe people can shift our focus a little bit.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm not the kind of person that will make this happen. So I'm just sort of throwing it out there.
Well, I'll probably come on to do just an arbitrary space on New Year's Eve if anyone wants to join, and we'll talk about random things, perhaps. But I'll probably do a space as New Year's comes in. But in the new year, we're still going to keep this going, and hopefully I'll organize things in a little bit better of a way so that I'll make sure I don't miss any topics and we don't talk about them too late. Because one of the things I think we actually do here well, Alex, is I think we consistently talk about things usually 1 to 2 weeks before a lot of other people mention them.
Yes.
Even stuff on the cutting room floor.
I appreciate that this is a quirky space that I think it's very clear that a lot of effort goes into finding things that are not the same stuff that is being talked about everywhere else. And sometimes that is stuff that, like that Tesla singer guy who dismembered that little girl or whatever.
Yes.
That you will not hear anywhere else in general because you won't. And sometimes it's something that is out of the blue, and then it becomes, a massive story that you hear about everywhere.
Yeah.
So, it has that sense of intermittent reinforcement, I feel, for people. So again, I appreciate it. I don't think we'll be able to always get the right stories, but at least we're not monkeying what everybody else is talking about.
Exactly.
And that has to count for something.
All right, Alex, if I don't talk to you before the new year, I hope you have a happy new year, and your 2026 starts off slightly less dumb than 2025, because remember, 2025 started off with a Tesla exploding in front of it.
Oh my God. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Happy New Year, Mr. Gator. Talk to you next year, or not, or soon. Who knows? Bye, everybody.
Right.
Thank you for being here with us.
Bye.